Good evening, everyone. Welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round 3 of the Pro Series in Season 9. We are at Watkins Glen this evening for 90 minutes of action. We have crossed continent from Paul Ricard last week, where it was Jardier that revitalised his winning ways in Season 9. He took an amazing masterclass drive of victory there at round 2. Managed to time all of those challenging, tricky conditions throughout the race to perfection and took a well-fought victory in the Honda for the very first time. Robin Schwanker started on pole position but could only manage to recover back to second place with that ambitious overcut strategy, and Teemu Karppinen rounded out the podium. Also, Luke Whitehead had a valiant effort in there as well with a similar strategy to Robin but couldn't quite pull it off in the end after a bit of contact heading towards the fast right-hander at the end of the straight. But with all that said and done, it put Jardier into the lead of the championship. I believe only 1 point ahead of Marek Schins, 2 points, ahead of the German driver. And then Teemu Karppinen sitting just 100 or so points behind those two. So very tight at the top of the standings. What a way to make an early statement at this point in the season. But we have news, we have things to talk about heading into today's race, because whilst the Honda has definitely been a competitive pick for the last couple of seasons now, yesterday there was a BOP update and change to that car alongside the Porsche and McLaren as well. Now, to the best of my knowledge and understanding, the Honda effectively got a power nerf at all tracks other than, I think it was around 5. I seem to remember certain ones like Spa being one of the biggest talking points where it didn't receive a nerf, much to the surprise of most of the sim racing community and myself included on that front. Then the Porsche has received some lift-to-drag ratio changes where it has lost a very small amount of downforce. I think I saw numbers of 1.4% being chucked around there, so that's going to hamper that car a little bit, and apparently also make it a little bit harder to drive as well on that front, trying to extract all of its pace in order to try to compensate for the straight line speed penalty that car is still very much experiencing. And the probably most curious of the changes of them all was to the McLaren, that did actually end up receiving an engine detune, I think, at all circuits, down to one of its baseline ratings. It speaks about limiter and 7,500 RPM or so. I know that that's sort of lingo means a little bit extra in terms of the general knowledge of the specifications on the cars, but yeah, the McLaren surprisingly getting that nerf, which isn't going to be helping some of those that have picked it. There's not too many drivers that are wielding that car in this season's championship, but certainly the likes of Robin Schwanker, who was very competitive at Paul Ricard, one of the better circuits for McLaren. If he ends up making a reappearance later on in the season, then that is something that maybe he'll be battling against. It's going to be really interesting to see the likes of Jardier, George Boothby, Marco Bischoff, Valentin Barrier, Grantas Carreras, all of those drivers wielding the Hondas and the Porsches that we've come to know so much to be at the front of the field. Have to see quite what that sort of puts them into standing for, and especially around a circuit like this at Watkins Glen, it could be very interesting indeed. Traditionally, the acceleration and braking capabilities of the Porsche have made it incredibly competitive, particularly in the final sector, but it always had that weakness on that big run up from turn 1 all the way towards the inner loop, which is where the Honda has been very strong. And with cars like the Ferrari being about, the Aston Martin being very competitive in a straight line, and some very quick drivers driving both of those cars, it'd be really interesting to see whether or not they end up being in a bit more of a competitive situation and position to put a challenge in for tonight's race. And speaking of which, let's have a little bit of a look at our circuit. So through that turn 1, 2, 3, 4 complex onto the max straight, and it is a very big overtaking opportunity around such a fast winding circuit. Through the inner loop into the outer loop of turn 5, we start to work your way back down the hill into this tricky twisty section, through shoot at turn 6, and then up a little incline towards turn 7 of toe corner, wrapping around there over the boot, and then down into heel of turn 8, and then another small climb up towards turn 9, trying to bounce on the power through there. Then the fast left-hander of turn 10, one of the biggest commitment corners. Second to that inner loop chicane, turn 11, where we saw last season Marco Bischoff pushing the limits a little bit too much there and giving quite the clobbering to the barrier, and it has certainly claimed a lot of very experienced drivers in all of that. It's almost like the equivalent of the Wall of Champions to some degree at the Montreal circuit. So we'll have to see how all of our drivers get on with that this evening. Also, big thank you. I think since our last stream we crossed over 1,700 subscribers, so amazing on all the support on that front, and always great to have that additional support and feedback on everyone enjoying this series. It is bringing us action and fantastic stuff week upon week, and with the driver lineup that we have going into tonight's race, I expect no difference. We have some very big names indeed. We've got some familiar faces and some of those newcomers to the Pro Series that we had the joy of seeing for the first time last week at Paul Ricard. But I think there's also a couple of extra ones on the list which you may or may not recognise, and they could be very exciting to watch indeed. So we will make our way over to the server in just a moment, as that should be up and running now, I do believe. And it is, so I will get us moved across into there in just a moment. And do my usual task of juggling some of these overlays and getting all of those bits and pieces set up. And there's also the prospects of a bit of wet weather in all of this as well, which can make things very interesting for our drivers. So I'm just sorting out my various controls and getting all of those pieces into place, and then we will have a look at how all of our drivers are getting on at this incredible circuit. Very much reminds me of almost maybe an American version of the Nürburgring. It is kind of a little bit Alton Parky in that way, of it has just these fast-paced corners, so much undulation, so much challenge for all of our drivers, and really puts them through their paces. I do believe that might be all ready to go. So let's have a look and see in these final remaining moments of the practice session before they all get going into qualifying, and how each of our drivers are getting on. Just a couple of other bits and pieces for me to add in, as the leaderboard just has a little bit of a moment in all of that. So let's get these other ones going here, and these will all start to piece their way together a little bit by the time we make our way into qualifying. But I think let's have a little bit of an onboard with Mr. Grantis Karekas. He's been a pole sitter on many an occasion here in the Pro Series, but hasn't ever quite been able to put it into a race win. And I've just noticed, actually, I have enabled game sound at my end, but it's not appearing on my meters. If someone in the chat could confirm as to whether or not the game audio is making its way through, that would be very much appreciated. But I have a feeling that it may not be picking up, which would be a little bit of an unfortunate situation. We'll stay on board with Karekas for the time being, as he makes his way around the circuit for the first time. But I do believe that I may be having an audio issue with the game. Yes, thank you for the confirmation on that front. I had a feeling that was the case. Okay, well, in which case I shall briefly place you back on the wonderful track guide that we have for this circuit, and shall try to sort that out. I do apologise, everybody. I'm not quite sure how that's gone wrong, but hopefully it will be just a moment. I do think we are now back in business on that front. I do apologise for that. For some reason, Windows had decided to. I think the comment Penta was on the in-game sound, which I do believe is now coming through. So thank you, Wiki, for that, because yeah, there was an issue at this end. Windows had decided to do its usual wonderful magic and play around with things when I didn't ask it to, but hopefully now that should all be coming through a-okay, and we can get back on board with somebody to take us through for a lap of this Watkins Glen circuit. So let's have a look and see who we got out on circuit at the moment. Well, I'll tell you what, one man I do want to draw some attention to is this man, Derry McCormack. You may recognise that name. Almost managed to clinch a title in the SRO Esports Championship once he was driving a Bentley, which is not the most common of cars that we see nowadays, but an incredibly fast driver, and I am very much certain that he is going to be putting in some fantastic performances in this. It's great to see him join the series. I do believe teammates with Tinko van der Velde, both part of Williams Esports, if I'm not mistaken. But Darren McCormack, very competitive in the Porsche. He's competitive in more or less any car that he decides to put himself in, but is certainly going to be a driver-car combination to look out for this evening. And also, we've got Redouane Messaoud in the grid as well, who is another driver that is very competitive indeed. He's just pulled off for the time being. Got the likes of Luke Addison returning to the series. Also got Patrick Pinon, who is part of the K. Kramer Racing Esports team, so another one of those team cars as well. So a lot of very fast drivers. And there we go, McCormack just starting his lap now. So through the exit of turn 1 then, and then winds your way up through turns 2 and 3. It's going to be very busy on the opening lap here. They're going to have multiple side-by-side moments through there, and you can have some pretty big major calamities if it all goes wrong as they're jostling for position, but hopefully these guys will manage to keep it together. And now, for a most demanding series of corners on the circuit, clobbering the curbs through the inner loop is McCormack, even onto the grass. You want to watch out a little bit for that, and I'll tell you what, if you try that in a Ferrari or McLaren, I think you'll be taking a very quick trip to the Shadow Realm, through the outer loop and into chute corner then of turn 6. Keep car hooked in on that inside line. Use that bit of curve to help pull you around, but don't get too sucked into it, otherwise you will end up in that grass very quickly. Brake very late in towards toe corner. Use that uphill incline to help slow the car down, and then on the power once again. See that little bit of extra tarmac on the left-hand side on the exit. You'll see these pro drivers eking out everything they can from this track. Into hill then at turn 8. Clipping that apex beautifully from McCormack. 10th up on his delta at the moment. Koreka's still setting the benchmark pace, but it is practice, remember, so we don't know exactly how representative these times are. Again, using all of the track on the exit of turn 9. Their big commitment in the Porsche now through into turn 10. Early upshift and gets himself set up in towards turn 11. One gear down, clips that apex up towards the wall, close as you dare towards the barrier, and then running it towards the line. And for the time being, it is almost good enough to go to the top of the timesheets, but a 42.970 will be half a tenth behind Koreka's best effort for the time being. And Van der Velde in the Ferrari, currently in the top 3 as well. And it'll be really interesting to see if we do have mixed conditions. The Ferrari, exceptional. We saw George Boothby when he was wielding the Ferrari here at Watkins Glen. He has been one of the biggest masters of this circuit and mixed conditions. He didn't quite manage to have the Mega Drive through the field up towards the podium that maybe he would have liked last week, but still a valiant effort to make up the positions that he did in the Honda at Paul Ricard. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Van der Velde in the Ferrari, particularly if we do have some rain popping in every now and again. That's a car that tends to be very well balanced in both sets of conditions, but that's where it's going to be sensitive through that inner loop chicane, and it's coming over that curb, and that's a perfect example. I'm glad it's in practice and I haven't commentator cursed Van der Velde too much there, but as you can see, those curves do not mess around, and they will bite very, very quickly, and even the greatest drivers end up being sucked in and spat out very quickly. So we'll take a look at an onboard replay of what that was like for Van der Velde there, coming through that first apex. Second one was alright. Third one went too wide, dipped a wheel on the grass, and then absolutely chucks you out to the outside of the corner there. And it also gets very dangerous in the race when drivers have moments like that as well, because it is very easy for those cars to end up in the path of others. And whether you end up being sent towards the outside of the circuit or the inside can be just a matter of millimeters in difference. We've also got this man back in the server, Marek Shins, having recently joined Race Anywhere SimSport in the Aston Martin. That's a car that may capitalise a little bit on those changes in BOP. We saw Valentin Barra be very competitive and consistently competitive. He wasn't able to put himself into a race-winning situation in that car, but he was very consistent during the season, and maybe with the Honda and the Porsche being a bit affected with those changes recently, maybe Marek Shins, who sits P2 in the standings, a couple of points behind Jardier, maybe in a good spot to try to capitalise on some changes in performance. And Valentin, of course, had a very disappointing performance last week in the end at Paul Ricard. He got himself into a race-winning position for the first time realistically, and he was there on pace, and then when the rain came down, Jardier put him under a significant amount of pressure. The two of them had a bit of a duel for a while, but unfortunately he came unstuck with the moment all by himself and then ended up dropping down the field. So he'll be hoping for better things. He has had good performances here at Watkins Glen in the past, so definitely has the opportunity to do something in that Honda today. Also, a man that performed very well last week, Florian Duacop. Didn't quite get the strategy right, but it was certainly a difficult one to call. But in the Mercedes, certainly extracting a fantastic amount of pace in that car around Paul Ricard, especially in those tricky wet conditions as well. Mercedes not always quite as easy to wield in those situations. Did see Jardier mentioning that Mercedes seems to have amazing straight line speed at Suzuka now with some of those recent changes. It's always been fairly competitive there, but certainly more so now with some of those BOP changes, putting that one in a stronger position. But we are now into qualifying. And it'll be Grantis Korekis who is first out on circuit then, as they all start to fly up through that sequence of corners for the very first time. Glorious shots we see them go through there. Amazing stuff. And on lap 1 it's going to be a very busy sector indeed. It looks busy enough and crowded enough right now, but I can tell you it's going to get absolutely mental on the first lap. Some big prizes up for grabs in this series. Big prizes, very high-skilled drivers, and a very tricky and demanding circuit. It tends to bring out some amazing action, which is what we're always treated to every single race in the Pro Series. And thank you for the confirmation there from the Hutchinson family on that front. And Jaid then, for the Canadian driver who's been putting in some amazing performances in the Ferrari. #1 Canadian on the LFM platform, and currently sits, I think, around 5th place in the championship standings, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check in just a moment, as I have a slight mouse and cursor crisis. But let's have a look and see whereabouts Jaid is. And 4th place, actually, for Hutchinson. So, and very much in the title fight at the moment on 2,249 points. So just 100 or so adrift of some of those around him. So some great early performances from the Canadian. And he'll be looking to continue that fine span of performances in today's race, and maybe mixed conditions will help the Ferrari driver around here. So Korekis first out on track then through turn 1 as he looks to make his way in that Porsche up through the winding complex here at Watkins Glen once more. He's been incredibly fast over the last couple of races, and last season in particular he was in the championship fight all the way to the very end, but didn't quite manage to put it together across the season. Wow, a big jump over the curbs there. That's going to lose him a little bit of pace and time, but he manages to gather it all up before the outer loop. And then on towards Chute corner now. A little bit wider maybe than he would have wanted to have been. Carries good momentum though on the exit. up through toe corner. You see him really struggling with the steering on the exit, really trying to thrash that car around. Maybe not quite up to temperature with those tyres, and maybe lacking a little bit of pressure as well for the time being. But right now, Karekas on a pretty smooth and tidy effort, and looking that around into turn 9. And then looking to close out the lap through this final sequence at turn 10, clipping that inside apex, using all that curb on the exit, back over to the left-hand side, swinging into turn 11 then, and then out towards the outside wall, pushing it as hard as he dares. And the Lithuanian, his first effort, what's it going to be as he hits time being 42.637. We'll see how that fares in just a moment. Van der Velde goes into provisional P2. Darren McCormack, though, 42.445 for the Irishman. Marek Shins up there in P3 on another 0.6. Very good stuff from him. We've got likes of Posnikov, Steinbrenner, Walsingham right now rounding out the top 10. Jardier in the Honda, and a very nice livery on that Honda as well. Actually, let's get a camera on that one. And one of the famous Jardier community team style liveries of that car, and a very nice one out of that. Drop down to P4 because, not to be outdone, good friend of Jardier's, but nothing being left off the table on when it comes to putting a lap around this circuit. Valentin Barrier showing exactly what he's made of, and it goes to the front row for the time being, but still almost 2/10 adrift of Darren McCormack, and they're all finding time in the early stages of this qualifying session, understandably, as a couple of yellow flags coming out there. Luke Whitehead gets himself up into P4, but only doing the one lap for the time being, and qualifying will be dry all the way throughout, so doesn't have to worry. None of these drivers have to worry about any wet conditions on the way, as McCormack continuing to find pace on this lap. A little bit of a compromised exit through turn 8 there, but gets good drive coming out of turn 9. He's getting a little bit of dirty air from the Honda in front, but it won't be affecting him all too much. In actual fact, we'll get a slight draft onto back straight. Got to be careful here, though, because he will lose a little bit of front downforce heading towards that barrier, and it's pretty close, but it's going to be a 10th.5 up. Van der Velde goes very close to beating the time, but 42.2 for McCormack there, making a statement on his first appearance in the Pro Series. Valentin, wide on the exit of turn 9, I think that was, flying now into turn 10. Has lost a bit of time, as George Boothby has also gone onto the front row provisionally. Still, though, almost 2/10 behind Darren McCormack. Valentin crossing the line then, good enough for P5 at the moment. Karekis on a big lap as well, sends it through the curbs there. See the car getting really unsettled, but manages to keep it all together. Good effort from Noah Reeder, front row for the time being for the German driver, and within just a few hundredths of McCormack. Comparing that to the reigning two-time champion Marco Bischoff, currently down in 10th place. Had a nightmare of a season opener at Paul Ricard. Got a drive-through penalty in the very early stages of the race, and right now not quite putting together the sort of laps that maybe we have come to know from the number 1 car. Remember, the driver numbers that you see correspond to their relative ELO rating to one another on the LFM platform. Marco Bischoff, the number 1 driver on the platform. Second to that is Grantis Karekis, hence the number 2 plate, as Van der Velde right now going purple on his lap, but he has got a little bit of traffic behind Karppinen. I think that is in the Grip Hacks Engineering BMW. Won't be affecting him too much. It's going to be pretty tight, though, with the margin towards his teammate. Gets good drive on the exit as he's closing on that delta towards McCormack's time, trying to use the drop of the BMW, but he's 15 thousandths of a second away from McCormack's effort, and he will go back towards the pits. George Boothby, though, on a big improvement. It's going to be very close once more. The Honda trying to see what he can do. I think it's just behind, though, and it's 30 thousandths, 300ths away from McCormack's time. Tiny margin separating the front drivers. Noah Reeder only 3 thousandths adrift of that. All of our top 5 within a 10th of a second, although it's going to about to get closer because Valentin Barrier on a big improvement, 2/10 for the Frenchman, and again, only good enough for P5, tiniest of margins, and this is exactly what we see in the Pro Series. You have to give everything you possibly can. Marco Bischoff doing exactly that, 3.5 tenths up on his previous best. Coming into those final couple of corners now. Big improvement through turn 10. Manages to get that set up nicely. Needs to be careful not to run too wide. And he's hit the wall on the exit. It will still be an improvement, but he has lost time there. We know that there's going to be a bigger lap there from the number 1 car, surely later on in this session. Only good enough for P7 for the time being. Luke Whitehead in the Porsche, the Englishman trying to see what he can extract out of that car, challenging Darren McCormack at the front of the table. Only good enough for P7 for the time being, but number 11 car will continue on another lap. Sammy Fock in that lovely Clown Fiesta Respurts livery. Certainly a standout one amongst the field, and breaks his way into the top 10 in the Ferrari for the number 4 car. Also got the likes of Jardier that's on an improvement. He's found a 10th already. He's getting a big slipstream. I think that's Soldatov that is in front of him. And he's going to get out of the way right before the braking zone as well. How's Jardier fare through the chicane? Sends it through the first apex. Misses the third, but brings up in time for the fourth. But you can see he's lost time there. So I think maybe actually the extra speed didn't quite help him settle the car into the braking zone there. McCormack has also started on another lap of his own. So imagine these times are going to continue to tumble in just a moment. That's Luke Whitehead pulling over to side of road, so he's decided to go for the pits for the time being. We see the Honda winding its way through the exit of Toe Corner, then blasting its way past with all of that VTEC power, and then down the hill towards turn 8. Hard on the brakes. Trying to get that nose tucked in, square up the car on the exit, can lose a lot of time through there. And that's, for a moment, there was a huge improvement for Messoud in... Oh, that's contact between 2 cars in qualifying. That's not what you want to see. That's involved the 31 car. That was Gareth Fullin in all of that. So that's certainly a messier than normal qualifying session. Don't see that happen all too often. But these drivers fighting for track, even in the qualifying 500, 600, 700 for Jardier on the exit of turn 11, but it's only good enough to go up 1 spot towards P9. Meanwhile, McCormack is on a flyer right now. 10th and a half almost improved on his lap time, trying to go for a 41. That would be an absolute gauntlet to throw down with just under 5 minutes left in this qualifying to go. Number 20 car, fairly new in relative terms to the LFM platform, similar to the likes of Luke Whitehead in that respect, but both of them already making big statements in their early races in this Pro Series. Winding his way now through turn 9 and then in towards the final couple of corners. Slings it in towards turn 10. Got to be careful not to take too much curb. He's maintaining that delta all the way around the lap. He hasn't quite found any extra. I say that. Oh, he's really pushed the limits there, and he's gained a little bit, lost a tiny amount with that touch on the wall, but it's a big lap time for McCormack. It won't be in the 41s, but it's a pretty stellar one at that. 42.122, and George Boothby continuing to put the Irishman under pressure. The number 5 car doing a 42.2. in all of that, 2,000ths quicker than Tinko, who is not improving on his lap. Who else have we got on a big lap at the moment? So Marek Shins was up by about 2/10. He's lost a little bit of time, though. It's going a bit back and forth for some of these drivers. So Deltas jostle around. He's losing time in the final section. I'm not sure it's going to be an improvement. Mateus Kuhn on a good lap, 2/10ths up in the opening sector, so that could help him break towards the top 5. Jardier heading towards the pits once more, so he'll have to go for a bit of a late effort. George Boothby, though, quarter of a second up on his lap time, 3/10ths up. Oh, that's very wide, though, and that's going to be... he's lost time on the exit there. I'm not sure if the lap has remained valid based on the delta. I think it has, but that is absolutely throwing everything at it as he tries to get to grips with this Honda. Of course, has used the Ferrari for the last couple of seasons in his Pro Series ventures. Switch to the Honda, has immediately settled in very nicely with that car, showing some great pace in the opening couple of rounds, but still finding the tricky limits of what that car has to offer. But right now he is on a big lap time, which would see him go to the top of the timing sheets if he can bring around the final couple of corners. We know that McCormack had a bit of a moment on the exit of turn 11. How's it going to be for the Honda? Wide on the entry. Oh, that's going to be close, and he has had to back out the throttle, and that's the lap gone to challenge for pole. It's only going to be 700th of an improvement by the end, and he stays out for another lap, so he must have some extra fuel in that car. Oh, and that's a big moment, and he's deciding to switch into the pits very quickly and have to get out of the pits quick if he wants to get another lap in there. But George Boothby trying to extract everything out. That shows you how good the lap was from McCormack, because George Boothby, winner around Watkins Glen here previously, and having to really go for gold in every single apex and corner. Luke Whitehead almost quarter of a second up, and he hasn't even got to the inner loop chicane though. How's he going to fare it through here? Porsche sends it through the first couple of apexes, clips all of those nicely, beautifully threaded through there, but slightly conservative relative to his previous lap, just over a 10th lost. And he's going to have to try to regain that time later in the lap if he wants to challenge around the top 5. Currently sitting in P7. We've also got Hutchinson in P9 on a small improvement. Bischoff trying to find some lap time. Redwan in 16th place, also gaining a little bit more at the moment. But right now it is Porsche, Honda, Ferrari and Porsche that make up your top 5. But Luke Whitehead trying to put in a good lap to make the German outfit a bit more dominant in those opening series of spots. Winding his way through, no reader briefly going purple for a moment, but I think he's pushed the car just a little bit too hard. Luke Whitehead continuing to find time on the lap, but not quite able to stay where he needs to be. I think George Boothby may have parked it, if I'm not mistaken. No, just bring out the yellow flag for just a moment. Luke Whitehead leaving nothing on the table on the exit, and he's benefited from it. It's not going to be good enough for pole, but it's good enough for P3, and still has time for one more lap if he can put one together. Grantis Korekis now flying in towards turn 10. He'll probably be one of the last few drivers to be able to get another effort in. Whitehead, Barrier, Van der Velde, all in the pits, so no further improvement for him. McCormack not improving. Korekis only a smidge up on his previous time, and it's not good enough to change position in the end, but he has just about managed to cross the line in time to go for a lap. Jardier, a 10th up on his previous time. Bouncing back a little bit. Current championship leader, last week's race winner, looking for a strong performance. Redwan unable to make his way into the top 10 with that last effort. But Jardier only 4/500ths of improvement up, and I don't think it's going to be good enough for a change of position for the Czech driver right now. Stays on the edge of the top 10. We've got Noah Eder, who has gained a little bit. Korekis, 2/10 up on his lap time. Lithuanian, who's taken multiple pole positions on the Pro Series calendar, hasn't been able to convert a single one into a win, but maybe looking a little bit more on the competitive side. I saw Marek Shinz's just finished the lap. He breaks his way into the top 10, pushes Jardier down in all of that. But right now, Grantis Korekis is your man to watch. He's almost a quarter of a second up. A quarter of a second is what he needs. McCormack will be sweating as he sits there in the pits. I think George Boothby actually still on an effort as well. He's a few hundredths down, but he's trying desperately to see if he can find anything in these final few moments of qualifying. But Korekis, though, going very quickly, has been absolutely stellar on one lap pace. One of McCormack's. And oh, that's a big, I think that was George Boothby in the background. It won't be an improvement for the British driver. Huge impact on the end of turn 9 there. But here comes Korekis around the final corner. It's only 2/10. It's not going to be good enough for pole. He might jump his way up to the front row, though, for the Lithuanian. It's going to be close, and he does just about. And in his very first Pro Series race, McCormack is going to take pole here at Watkins Glen in fantastic fashion. And my goodness, what a qualifying session that was, and sets us up for an amazing race ahead of us without a shadow of a doubt. And then we will have a bit of a look through the grid in all of that. As I will get us moved over to have a wander through the starting grid in just a moment, waiting for the overlay to pop up for that. But my goodness, Watkins Glen putting on a show for us in the qualifying, having contact in that qualifying session as well between a couple of drivers. I saw Gareth Full involved in that. I wasn't quite sure who the other driver was, but my goodness, hopefully that's not too much of a sign of things to come in the race, but really showing how everybody is pushing to the absolute limit around this demanding American track. As just waiting for those pieces to come through. And I think they have, so I shall just get these last remaining things set up and ready, and we shall have a look through our grid. So, Darren McCormack then starts on pole position in his very first Pro Series race. Amazing stuff from the Irishman. Granted, Crackers couldn't quite put the lap together that he needed in the end, but showed some stellar pace as always in qualifying. Starts on the front row. George Boothby starts in P3 as he continues to get to grips with the Honda. Great stuff there from him. Luke Whitehead, another one of the British drivers, starts on the second row in the Porsche. And Valentin Barrett, impressive again from the Frenchman, and I have to see if he can bounce back from what ended up being a great performance last week, but a little bit disheartening for him in all of that. Van der Velde starts in 6th place. And Noah Reeder out-qualifying the reigning two-time champion and his teammate Marco Bischoff, who starts in P8 in the number 1 car. Another strong qualifying from Jaid Hutchinson, the Canadian, starting in 9th position in the Ferrari, and then Marek Shins rounding out the top 10 in the Aston Martin, and crucially starting just ahead of his championship rival, Jaroslav Honzik, GR8, in the number 3 car, starting in P11. I imagine he'll be a little bit disappointed, perhaps, with that qualifying session. Redouane Messou, the Frenchman, very quick as well, and starts in P12. Matthias Kuhn starts in 13th place in the number 6 car. Wasn't quite able to put together a lap that I think he would have wanted in the end either. And then Samir Fock starts in 14th place, just ahead of Timu Karppinen, the Finnish driver, who currently sits 3rd in the championship standings. And then Aidan Walsingham in a very nicely liveried Mercedes there for Visceral Esports starts in P16. Alexandre Lay, the Frenchman, the number 24 car, will start in P17 with Patrick Pignon in the 18th spot. And another one of the K. Kramer Racing Esport cars, followed up by Sasha Vassner in the LFM liveried Porsche. And then rounding out the top 20 is Alexander Shichinov in the Honda. Matis Lateo in the Audi. Not a car that we're seeing wielded too much at the moment by some of our drivers. Starts in 21st position. 22nd goes to Malik Mamad in another one of the Ferraris. Boris Gavfulin, who did seem to have a slightly complex qualifying session. We didn't quite catch what happened there, but he'll be hoping for a bit of a quieter time in the race relative to that. Manos Gerardis, who showed some really good pace last week at Paul Ricard. It all went wrong in the opening series of laps. I think there was contact with Marco Bischoff, actually, that sent him off, unfortunately. Hugo Bochet starts in 25th, with Florian Duacop starting in 26th. A good effort from the Mercedes driver, but he would have been wanting a little bit more from that. But long race, of course, 90 minutes today. Yano Grande, the Spaniard, starts in 27th place, with Luke Anderson returning to the grid in 28th in the BMW that he's been using for the last couple of seasons now. Wiltek Neuwirth starts in 29th position, with Andrei Bosnikov starting in 30th in the Honda. Followed up is Rui Nunes in a very nicely liveried Porsche, the Portuguese driver, starting in 31st, just ahead of this man, Alessio Mellis, the Italian, in the Italian outfit, and see how he gets on today. Leonardo Porco, another Italian, in the Porsche just behind. And then Marco Schada in that Yeet Esports liveried Aston Martin, as that V8 growls very wonderfully in the background there. Nico Pennon, the Finnish driver, starting in 35th place. And then just behind is Christopher Hoffman, the German, starts in 36th. And then bringing up the final few spots on this grid are Nils Steinbrenner in the LFM BMW. Konstantin Soldatov starting in 38th. He might have been wanting a little bit more from that qualifying session as well. And then at the back of the grid is Thomas Morant, who starts in 39th place. So, how will all of our drivers fare around this amazing circuit then? We will have to wait and see. We'll be getting underway very, very shortly. And also just get the final couple of bits and pieces on the overlay sorted. If I can juggle my things around on my screen a little bit, that would be delightful. And of course, as always, there will be a mandatory pit stop for these drivers, and they will have to serve that in a 20-minute window in the middle of the race. Right now, it looks like it's going to be dry and stable weather conditions for the early part of the race in this opening half an hour with a pretty dead wind as well. It might end up being pretty much like that for the majority of the race, but who knows? And without doubt, even without the extra complexity of some rain or something like that, I have no doubt whatsoever that our drivers are going to be putting together some very exciting bits and pieces of action for us. As I'm just sorting out one final piece before we get underway, if I can. So just bear with me for a few seconds. I do believe I have all of that ready to go now. So, Darren McCormack then in his first race in the Pro Series, making a statement and a half to start on pole position here for round 3 at Watkins Glen. Will he be able to convert that into a victory? We'll have to wait and see. He's got some very rapid drivers around him that are going to give him a tough time. Grantis Korekis on the front row as well will be looking to do big things, and they all start to make their way towards turn 1 for the first time, almost making it 4 abreast towards turn 1. McCormack though leads. Korekis on the outside. Who's going to lead on the exit of turn 1? McCormack sails into the lead there, but he's got to be careful with some of those cars as they all fly through the opening series of corners for the very first time. And see side-by-side action, almost 3 wide further down the order, but they all get through there easily for the first occasion by the looks of it. But here comes George Boothby in the Honda, using all of that straight line speed. Korekis, nothing he can fight with. McCormack trying to box him in towards that inner loop chicane. Who's going to come out on top? Korekis maintains position, does he? George Boothby fighting side by side. McCormack escaping in front. Korekis over the grass on the inside of the curb. Dream start for the Irishman in the lead. Boothby still fighting on the outside of turn 5, but he can't make it stick and has to stay in third. Luke Whitehead down the inside of Valentine Barry is also trying to make a play around the British driver. Who's going to come out on top in all of that? And it stays with Whitehead for the time being. Noah Reader getting involved in all of this onto the back of Tinko as well, but Dreamstar out front for Darren McCormack. Noah Reader wide though on the entry towards toe corner, and Van der Velde fighting back on the exit. Big moment for Marco Bischoff on the exit of the turn 7. Caught the wheel on the grass there. And actual fact, excuse me, that's Noah Reader and Jaid Hutchinson battling for position. The Porsche driver all the way around the outside and a bit more to trying to maintain that one. Marco Bischoff is right behind him as they all fly through into the final sector for the very first time. And they stay as they were, but McCormack leads their dream start for him. 1.2 seconds as the opening lap of this race, and Korekis holds on to position. Oh, big moment for George Boothby. Clobbers the wall on the exit of turn 11. That's going to be a chunk of damage for the British driver. Further down the order, see some side-by-side action going on. That Samir Fock and Matthias Kuhn Karppinen all involved in this one as well. Big dive down the inside of, who was that? That was Alexander Lay that completely missed his braking, and that's going to make things very busy on the run-up towards the inner loop chicane as they all fly through there. We'll have to check on that battle in just a moment because there's another drag race further up happening ahead. First of all, Valentine Barrett versus Luke Whitehead. Who's going to come out on top of that? Whitehead defensive towards the inner loop chicane. He's going to defend that one behind Marek Shins versus Noah Reid and Marco Bischoff. They all stay as they were as well. What about further back? Mateus Alexander Lay, wide moment. Carpenen over the grass. So's Lay, Samir Fock and Walsingham trying to go around the outside. Several cars sweeping around the outside of them in towards the outer loop corner there. Walsingham still stuck on the outside as they fly through there. Samir Fock trying to see if he can find an opportunity in towards turn 6 now, but he can't make his way through there too wide. The Mercedes manages to slot his way through. Look at all these cars flying through this series of corners. A break in the pack for these guys further down the order. Carpenen goes up the inside of one of the Ferraris who ran a little bit wide there. I'm trying to catch on a better camera who that was. Shichinov trying to go towards the inside, looks towards the outside once more. Patrick Pignot under pressure from Florian Duakop, side by side multiple times over with the likes of Duakop, Garafulin, Vassner, Gerardis as they all fly into the final sector, but more or less I think staying as they were. Checking up at the front though once more. McCormack still leads, Korekis P2, Boothby P3, Whitehead 4th, and Valentine Barrett rounding out the top 5 as this top 6 starts to break away a little bit from Hutchinson, currently sitting in P7. Korekis though, fastest lap of the race by a few hundredths of a second, but Valentine Barrett looking very competitive right now and trying to put pressure onto Whitehead, who I think is being a little bit bottlenecked by a slightly wounded George Boothby, swapping of positions between Gerardis and Sasha Vassner towards turn 1. The Greek driver coming out of that one worse in the end, side by side further up as well between Shichinov and the Porsche, but it's all getting busy up at the front for the battle for the podium. Whitehead, Boothby almost 3 wide towards the inner loop chicane. They just about managed to get through there. Okay, Whitehead wide over the exit. Valentine trying to capitalise, and the Frenchman is off onto the marbles on the exit of the outer loop. He's going to rejoin behind Hutchinson, I think that is, and now in towards P7. So Whitehead still on the back of George Boothby and Barrier having to recover and all that. Jarlier has made a move up into 10th place, has made a way past Marco Bischoff, who is struggling a little bit for pace at the moment by the looks of it. Marek Shins trying to put some pressure onto Noah Ida, who's again got a little bit wide in towards toe corner. We saw that give an opportunity earlier on. Battles further down the order for 25th position. Yana Grande, Voltek Neuwirth, and Nico Pennanen, who's just been sent around by Nunes in the Porsche. Pennanen and Steinbrenner have also had a bit of a moment there, I think, as well. White flag out for several cars. Pennanen, though, dropping all the way to the back of the grid. 3 wide between Shada Porco and that is Soldatov in all that as well, in towards heel corner there, and it's Soldatov that comes out ahead on the exit. Marco Shada still trying to send up towards the inside, in towards turn 9 there, as there's a big slide for Leonardo Porco. Side-by-side action further down. I think that's Alessio Mellis jumping off the grass in all of that. Picked the wrong car, excuse me there, as they're side-by-side in towards turn 11 there. Down the inside, the Ferrari goes. Oh, almost contact, and there is contact! And Pennanen collects a Ferrari, a tap onto the Honda, sends Alessio Mellis round, and then Pennanen nowhere to go, collects him, and that is Malik Mahmoud, who goes straight into the wall on the exit. But up at the front, Jardier trying to continue to make some moves, using that Honda power. It may have had a nerf, but it's not decrease the speed all too much against the Aston. No, the Aston is very strong in a straight line, and Jardier will have to stay behind Shins for the time being. These two, remember, battling right now at the top positions in the championship, as Yana Grande and Sasha Vassner also, I think, may have just swapped positions. Of course, losing a bit of straight line speed, understandably, and under pressure now from the Aston Martin. Lateo wide. Oh, and the Audi almost goes around the 24 car of, 34 car of Bosnikov. Had to go around the outside for a moment there, dives down the inside of Lateo in towards turn 6, and as they go side by side through that series of corners, Audi on the grass on the exit, and Lateo now trying to fight back around down the inside of Hoffman, who's going to get hung out to dry, I think, on the exit of toe corner. No speed through there. It's a little bit like turn 2 at Bathurst, so you just can't carry any momentum through that part of the circuit. You have to stick in the camber of that inside line. Marco Bischoff putting pressure onto Redouane Messoud. He's lost 4 positions so far this race. Not what the German driver, not what the reigning 2-time champion would have wanted. And he's opening couple of races. Oh, as Luke Whitehead has apparently swapped positions with Van der Velde. I think those two were already like that, so I think that might be the leaderboard getting a little bit excited. But I tell you what it has done is alerted me to the fact that I think Van der Velde may be in a position to make a move here, because remember, that Ferrari pretty good in a straight line, and the Porsche of Whitehead not getting the best toe off Boothby in third place at the moment, but it's pretty balanced actually between the pair of them. Not gaining in the slipstream is the Ferrari, so we fly through the chicane there. Whitehead chucking over curbs. Oh, Tinko, big mistake, and over the grass. He's going to lose the back end. Can he keep hold of it? Brilliant car control from the number 22, coming right in front of Norita. It has to take evasive action there. Almost a huge moment, and slams the door on Van der Velde there, who is lucky not to lose another position or his entire race. That was a huge moment, and Norita, after getting that position already, chucking it over the curbs on the exit, does bounce through there safely though in the end. Fastest after the race goes to Valentine Barry and Marek Schins, and Jardier side by side on the exit of Toe Corner now. Jardier trying to use the acceleration in the Honda, but look at the Aston Martin pull down that back stretch. We talked about the Mercedes straight line speed, the Aston, not something to be snuffed at whatsoever. So we'll have to wait for another opportunity elsewhere in this race, but still less than 10 minutes into this 90-minute race, and whilst these guys may be battling like it's a 20-minute sprint, they certainly have plenty of opportunities to continue these fights and plenty of opportunities to give us amazing action. Marco Bischoff running a little bit wide through turn 10 there. Redouane looking pretty competitive behind, seems to maybe have a bit more of an advantage over Marco, at the moment. Just seems to be a bit more confident in the car. Marco Bischoff a little bit wide by the looks of it on the entry towards turn 1 as well. And we'll check in though. Tinko recovering after that mistake, trying to put Whitehead under pressure now, trying to do the very same thing on to Noah Ida, swinging towards the left-hand side. Seems to have more straight line speed versus the number 17 car. Noah Ida slots in behind Marek Schins, defending from Jardier once more, almost being pushed along through the chicane, but they all stay as they were for those two. But Tinko recovering and all of that. Yano Grande and Luke Addison battling side by side, almost contact on the entry there. Addison has to cut towards the grass. A big moment for Addison in the background, but he keeps it together. Yellow flag out for Bourchier further down the order, trying to see. Oh dear! Oh, something very bad happened there. Unfortunately, didn't go back far enough on the replay. There's a chunk of damage on the front of that BMW, so I think there may have been contact through turn 2 and 3, and I think that's going to be a parked car for Hugo, unfortunately. Meanwhile, Matthias Kuhn and Walsingham were very close to one another, Marco Bischoff and Matthias Kuhn actually were those on the Delta that were pretty close. This train of cars all battling very intensely right now as they flash past our screen. That's all the way from Tinko down towards Marco Bischoff and Matthias Kuhn. So that's down to 14th place. McCormack, though, leads by 2.2 seconds now. And George Boothby, despite the damage that he would have sustained on that car, has managed to keep himself in a competitive position, and he's within just a few tenths of a second of Karekas right now in P2. So will he be able to make something happen as they hop on board the front splitter? And it's a big draft already that the Honda is getting, and I think he might just breeze his way past the number 2 car. I don't think there's anything that Karekas can do, although he's still fighting on the entry. But George Boothby, does he make it stick this time around? And he does. The man that's won here before gets his way into P2 and sets off in charge of Darren McCormack, who leads this race now by almost 3 seconds. Karekas drops to P3. Jade Hutchinson now with the fastest lap of the race. Great stuff there from the Canadian. Has gained 4 positions, managed to keep out of a bit of trouble in all of that as well. Saw Gerardis and Gareth Fullin, I think, have a bit of a battle. There's also something going on with Luke Addison in all of that. He's squabbling and diving towards the inside, or attempting to, of Steinbrenner in towards turn 6. Can't quite make anything stick for the time being. I think Luke Addison may have had a complicated moment through the chicane once more. He's got Sasha Vassner hunting all over his gearbox, but can't make anything stick just yet. As further up the order, Samir Fock also putting some pressure onto Alexandre Lay as that train starts to break apart just a little bit. I tell you what though, there are so many battles on track at the moment, doing my absolute damnedest to keep up with each and every one of them. Look at this, the tail end of the podium, all the way from 2nd down to 6th place. Valentine to close back up on this group of cars and is giving us some amazing action. Correct, as you can see, very fast, but just doesn't have a straight line speed to compete with the Honda, and George Boothby will just be able to breathe a sigh of relief. Someone that can't, though, is Luke Whitehead, who again has got a Ferrari on his gearbox. He managed to fend off and force Tinko into a mistake last time, but now he's got Hutchinson, the Canadian, who's trying to make a statement here and close in onto the British driver. Currently sits 4th in the standings, does Hutchinson, but he backs out of it for the time being. Doesn't have the overlap, but he needs to go for a move just yet, recognising it's a long race. Jardier, though, trying to make a move around Shins, and it's a bigger effort this time for the Czech driver and the championship leader. Puts himself in towards P9, overtakes his current rival in the standings, and that's important stuff there for the number 3 car around the outside in towards the inner loop chicane. Marco Bischoff, Red One Messoud, all looking racy! All big wiggle moment for Red One in the 25 car, almost giving Shins a bit of a moment to worry about. Now he's got Marco Bischoff all over his gearbox and trying to go all the way around the outside. I'm not sure that's going to work out anytime soon, but with Germany does drop a car length or so back from the Frenchman. Further up the field, Korekas starting to lose a little bit of time to George Boothby as these drivers spread out a tad. Korekas, though, fast in his final sector, understandably, in the Porsche. 3 seconds is the gap between McCormack and George Boothby, maintaining that gap over the last lap. Now that George Boothby has been released into some clean air, so I have to see how that changes throughout this race, and still dry weather for the next 30 minutes, so nothing to worry about on that front for the time being, as Red One trying to put some pressure onto Marek in the number 16 car in front of him, showing his nose towards the inside, a little bit far back for the time being. Further down, we've got Florian Ducot trying to go all the way around the outside of Patrick Pignon in the battle for 19th position. A Mercedes driver trying to get the comeback towards the inner loop chicane, and have to do it in the drag race, I think. They're not able to do anything just yet. But what about this train of cars towards the inner loop chicane? Let's go on board the rear splitter of the Aston Martin of Shins and see Red One. He's coming under pressure from Marco. You might see a red car pop out from behind him in just a moment. You see it right there on the gearbox, but unable to make anything stick just yet. Meanwhile, Duakop trying to go around the outside, and contact between the pair of them, but Florian Duakop off, keeps out of the wall just about. Patrick Pignon has continued and stays in 19th place, but those two making contact through the chicane there, and Florian Duakop plummeting down the order. Big disappointment there for the German, who not having the day that he would have wanted after showing some great promise last week. And that's very unfortunate, bouncing back from a difficult qualifying session, but it has not gone his way in the race. And now checking back up on these battles further up the field for the tail end of the top 10. Messoud trying to use that Porsche pace in the final sector, the final way past the Aston Martin. You can see good acceleration and rotation through all of these corners, showing his nose at every possible instance, trying to fill up the mirrors of that Aston Martin and see if he can force an error out of Marek Shins. Very capable drivers, these two, and I'm sure Marek is used to having to put up a pretty strong defence. He has got that straight line speed advantage, as Marco Bischoff has made a move past Matthias Kuhn by the looks of it, unless that's the leaderboard. And it was the leaderboard. I do apologise. I really got excited there, but the leaderboard has just thrown just a bit of an unnecessary wobbly. Marco Bischoff and Matthias Kuhn maintaining positions. But let's have a look on the drag race once more towards the inner loop chicane. Mountain barrier trying to gain on Hutchinson. The Frenchman trying to recover after that mistake earlier on. Can't make it stick. But what about Jardier? And he's past Noah Reader now. Puts a car between himself and Marek Shins and up into P8, using that straight line speed advantage that he has. It may not be as strong as it once was previously, but the Honda still proving very, very much the Titan when it comes to the back straights. Although the Aston Martin, not too shabby itself. Marco Bischoff and Red One now under pressure, made a mistake, I think, and has now lost the position. Marco Bischoff, and has got the undercut going on from Matthias Good on the exit of turn 6 there, but he's going to be on the outside heading towards turn 7. Big late braking move from Matthias Good, but that won't be helping him out on that outside line. So Red One losing a position there to Marco Bischoff, who now sets off in sights of Marek Shins, who's filling out the mirrors of Norita. Immediately, he was made a mistake heading in towards heel corner, and that's not benefited Marek all too much, but is bringing the K Kramer Racing Esports teammate to Norita, Marco Bischoff, into this every single step of the way. Is allowing Red One to also regain a bit of ground as well on board the number 1 car. This is Marco Bischoff looking at the rear wing of that Aston Martin now. The Porsche is able to absolutely fly through these corners, although it's wide for Marco Bischoff and almost into the wall. And now we've got Red One immediately on the attack once more, who's trying desperately to get his nose up the inside, but he can't do anything towards turn 1. The Frenchman stays where he was for the time being. Checking in further up though, Valentine very close to the back of Jaid Hutchinson, who may have run out of abilities to defend against the Honda, because here comes the number 9 car trying to find his way through. It's very tight between those two, and Valentine backs off in the end, unable to do anything. But Marek Shins in the Aston Martin absolutely overpowers Norita there, and it's Red One Mesut trying to fight back after losing the position. Only a lap ago. It's down the inside of Marco Bischoff through the inner loop chicane, and maybe even a move on to Norita in front, who's gone wide. Almost 2 positions in just as many corners for Mesut for a second there, but has to settle for 11th place for the time being. Marco Bischoff still latched onto back this train of Porsches that is building up. Walsingham gaining in all of this as well. Good effort there from him in the Mercedes, extracting some strong pace out of that car that doesn't naturally lend itself to this circuit. Red One a bit wide on the exit there, gives an opportunity to Marco Bischoff, who's trying to set up move, but he's able to get back across towards the inside line before turn 8 and back across once more. Oh, he's got to be careful not to do too many moves down the straight. They weren't side by side, so he'll probably get away with it this time around, but imagine these stewards, where we do have live stewards now in the top split of this race, this championship, excuse me, and they'll be keeping an eye on absolutely everything, doing a stellar job. As Red One Mesut, big tank slapper, keeps it pointing forwards in the end, only loses 1 position, but my goodness, how he even kept. That's Marco Bischoff immediately. He compromises his line and goes into the wall. Damage for Marco Bischoff. Red One immediately coming back past on the run towards turn 1, and Walsingham's involved in all of this one as well. Red One through on the inside towards turn 1, the Mercedes through on Matthias Kuhn, and maybe even able to make up another position on Marco Bischoff. Who's this at the tail end of it? Alexandra Lay is getting involved as well. Walsingham gains 2 positions. Lay overtakes Matthias Kuhn as well. So somehow in all of that, Red One, after his big mistake, manages to regain the position almost immediately. And Walsingham now trying to go around the outside of Red One. Amazing stuff from the British driver for Visceral Esports, but he's gone too deep through a chicane, and he's jumped away. Contact Marco Bischoff, and it's Bischoff off into the wall. Walsingham contact there. Red One stays ahead of all that. Matthias Kuhn gains a position. So does Alexandra Lay. Samir Fogg benefits in all of that as well. And it's Walsingham now down to 15th. Karpinen in 16th behind. And Marco Bischoff now with an even bigger recovery drive needed in order to make his way up the order. Absolute chaos in the mid-pack. With that battle there, Walsingham almost gaining 3 positions in a few corners, but then put too much speed into that inner loop chicane and resulting in contact with the number 1 car that sends him flying down the order. And now it's going to be just a case of trying to minimise the damage from this circuit. Checking back in at the front of the field though, Jaid Hutchinson continuing to put pressure onto Luke Whitehead. George Boothby and Darren McCormack have maintained their gap to one another. Very even pace between those drivers. 3 seconds still is McCormack's lead. Korekis though has dropped back a tad, and so has Luke Whitehead to Korekis in all of that. Hutchinson and Barrier and Whitehead though all get involved in this, and Red One Mesut has come into the pits there. So I don't imagine that's for damage, and that's not in the pit window, so I can only imagine that's for a drive-through penalty of sorts. So the Frenchman, after fighting back in all of that, ends up dropping down the order anyway. Hutchinson now trying to make another attack onto Luke Whitehead around the outside, up towards the inner loop chicane, and he does make it stick, does he? As in a white flag out for George Boothby. Nothing seemingly has happened too much in all of that there. Maybe the leaderboard is having a bit of a worrisome time after all the action we've had over the last couple laps for Hutchinson, and the Canadian gets himself up into 4th place. Great effort there from the man in the Ferrari. Whitehead unable to fight back, and now he has the Frenchman of Valentine Barrier just behind, who I imagine could very well get past on the next lap. It does seem like Whitehead is running a bit of a lower downforce setup, which is allowing him to defend a bit stronger against some of these cars, but still ultimately not able to do it. And it will be eating into his tyres as well, having to run that reduced downforce on the number 11 car. So not ideal for the British driver, but still in a strong position right now in the top 5, especially with other big names in this championship having a troublesome time. No Reader still close up to the back of Marek Shins. And we also got the likes of Jardy, who's trying to close in on that group for the podium all the way down to near the tail end of the top 10. That's how much of a battle that train is having. I've also got Soldasov, Vassner and Florian Duakop that are having a squabble of their own. It says on my graphic, oh dear, it was red one. Apologies for the, not exactly commentator's curse, but putting the camera on you and having a bit of a mistake there through the inner loop chicane. Does seem to suggest he served a pit stop, so I'm not entirely sure what that was for, because that will not actually overall count towards his pit total, so he will have to still serve a pit stop elsewhere. Just checking further up the order, Barrier not able to close in on Whitehead this time around. I thought he might have had a shot at going to P4 there. Yellow flag, who's that for? Further down the order, that is Rui Nunez, who was stopped on circuit, and I can't see any damage on that car. It's just come to a complete halt. So the Portuguese driver has just retired to the pits, and looks like he won't be competing any further in this race. Meanwhile, Valentine, maybe an opportunity up towards toe corner. Censored one, terrible camera angle. Didn't matter though in the end. Whitehead able to maintain his line, and Valentine not looking to make any more mistakes. He lost a potential race victory last time out of Paul Ricard as a result of an unforced error. He put himself in a compromised position this race after making a mistake as well, and is trying to see if he can get a bit more consistency in that car, but he is really putting pressure onto Whitehead. He doesn't want Hutchinson to be able to escape all too much and get too comfortable. Hutchinson still with the fastest lap of this race. We'll have to see if that changes when we enter the second half, as we approach the end of the first half an hour, and still dry weather right now, but the wind has picked up just a tad, so there's a possibility for some very late rain perhaps in this race, but right now at least it is staying dry as Alexandre Lay has dropped down the order. I feel, did he make a mistake through turn 11? Is a big slide on the entry there for a 24 car. Oh, and he doesn't quite pull up in time into the barrier. Then he goes and taking a bit of damage for good measure in all of that, unfortunately. Valentine, though, stronger than he's been before, and he's managed to get towards the inside line. Whitehead holding strong on the outside. Can he break Lay around the outside? Oh, brave stuff from Luke Whitehead, but it's all too much, and he's taken the curb on the second part of the apex, loses the position, and here comes Van der Velde now trying to go around the outside at the turn 5 there. Number 22 car trying to recover some positions himself, but that is going to make life very difficult for Whitehead because he has lost all sorts of slipstream in front of him, and the Ferrari may well be able to pounce on the Porsche. So Valentine managing to make his way up into P5 now, and sets off on a charge towards the Canadian that sits in P4. So also checking in at 2.2 seconds now, the gap between George Boothby and Darren McCormack. Bearing in mind that Honda running a little bit wounded. We saw very early on in the race that Boothby got some damage on that car, and he's not letting it slowing him down. Maybe slowing him down ultimately, but right now he's putting in some very quick laps, and you'd have to say, based on what we saw on that initial drag race towards the inner loop chicane, if he can close up to McCormack, I'm not sure there's anything the Irishman could do to defend against the British driver. Of course, George Boothby, one of the most winningest drivers in the Pro Series. I'm slightly, can't exactly remember the stats now. I think he's won maybe 5 or so races. I think Marco Bischoff now may be the winningest driver after his recent form at the beginning of this season, tail end of last season. But George Boothby, very successful in the Pro Series. Hasn't quite managed to set himself up for a full championship charge as of yet. Maybe that'll change this season. Manos Gerardis, Patrick Pignon and Marco Bischoff having a scrap. Bearing in mind, 2 teammates in the K. Kramer Racing Esports sandwich is Manos Gerardis, but he is the car that's got the better straight line speed in the BMW. It's not the fastest in a straight line, but he looks left, he looks right. Patrick Pignol trying to make his car as wide as possible to help out his teammate. And here comes a Greek driver around the outside. It's not going to be a straightforward one. Can he make it stick around the outside? We saw Jardier do it earlier, and Gerard's in the 37 does go through, and he manages to pull that one up just about. And now Pignol in the 30 car has his teammate all over his gearbox. I'm not sure he'll put up quite the same level of fight in all of that, as Marco Bischoff sends it down the inside there in towards turn 6. I do need to check, though, further down the order, because I think there's been a major bit of jostling of position for down. I'm going to run this back 30 seconds and see if I can catch what on earth was going on a few moments ago, because I saw several bits of the leaderboard moving around. I'm just trying to see. I think maybe the bulk of it may have been Pennington versus Florian Duakop. I'm not quite sure what else was happening there, but Florian was trying to go around the outside in towards the inner loop chicane, but was unable to do so by the looks of it, and the Finnish driver managing to maintain position. As we will check in on a battle between Lay and Karppinen in just a moment. Those two look like they were going side by side. Alexandra Lay down the inside on the run towards turn 10. Oh, Dionov gone back on the replay. There's immediately a yellow flag for the Frenchman, and we'll find out what that is. Oh, and he's in the wall. What's happened there for Alexandra Lay? Oh, and it's a big smack into the wall there for the number 24 car into turn 11. So maybe contact on the entry between himself and Karppinen. Unfortunately, couldn't quite catch the beginnings of that. And unfortunately, that sends him down the order, and that is heavy damage onto that car. And thank you for the info there, Messoud. He did do a pit stop. It wasn't a drive-through. He underfueled the car. Huge mistake there for the Frenchman. Maybe misjudged where the pit window was going to end, or maybe put in a qualifying fuel load, though he did go fairly far into this race, but that is very unfortunate for the Frenchman. Van der Velde continuing to put some pressure onto Luke Whitehead, but unable to do anything just yet. Meanwhile, Soldatov and Addison very close together. I think Soldatov may have just made a move. I think that was him just getting the position done and dusted as they entered the inner loop chicane. Number 8 car in the Aston Martin using that good straight line speed that car has at the moment to get that one done. Meanwhile, Matthias Kuhn trying to break his way back in towards the top 10. Very busy day for him on multiple occasions so far. Currently sits in P11, looking at the back of Noah Ida's car as he follows through the final sector in towards turn 10. In fact, let's go on board with Matthias Kuhn. Trying to follow through these high commitment corners is very difficult. As a pair of them clobber the wall. Well, I think that's a perfect example. Well, as mentioned there, that's twice I seem to have done that to people. I do apologise, everyone in this top split. I do seem to be cursing you just a tad, but both drivers there showing exactly why turn 11 can be quite so deadly. And yeah, absolutely, Penta, we were talking about earlier that George Boothby has been closing onto McCormack. He's done it again. He's taken another second out for the battle for the lead, very much on. And with still an hour of this race left to go, the Irishman may have some troubles holding him back, as now Mateus can try to go around the outside. Oh dear, I think Hutchinson has made a mistake at the inner loop chicane as well. It looks like these two are going to stay as they were. Valentin has made his way past. So let's see what happened there. It was a pretty big gap between himself and Valentin. So unfortunately, I have a horrible feeling that Jaid is going to lose this all by himself, and the inner loop chicane is going to strike on the Ferrari over the first apex, over the second. Oh, there you see the awkward bump. Over the grass he goes. Oh, and a big jump and a big slide to catch that as well. But the number 10 car does well to keep it all together and only loses one position in the process. Could have been so much worse. We saw Tinko suffering badly with that earlier on. Yana Grande and Neuwirth going side by side in towards toe corner. The Aston Martin with the inside line in a much more competitive spot on the exit there, and does manage to get his way in front. The Audi though, good straight line speed. Does Grande think about a move down the inside in towards turn 8? The answer is no. He stays back for the time being, so move up for Votek into 19th position. But absolutely, that gap at the front of the field is coming down. 3/10 in favour of George Boothby last time round. That's only 2/10 slower than his fastest lap of the race. Compare that to McCormack's drop-off in pace, it's 6/10. So maintaining those tyres quite nicely. Noah Reid and Mateus going side by side towards turn 1. The number 6 car down the inside and makes the move stick. And Samir might get involved in all of this one as well, because that's going to compromise the exit of the German driver ahead of him. He will have a slipstream off his fellow countryman. And here comes a Ferrari, may not be the fastest in a straight line. Oh, this is very awkward. Samir trying to find space. Noah Reid on the left-hand side. Bump drafting Mateus Gunn in front of him to try to get the move done onto Noah Reid. Walsingham back involved in this one as well. And the Ferrari driver does make his way through. Almost has a repeat of what Hutchinson did moments ago. But Samir Fock now up into 11th place and may be able to put some pressure onto Mateus Gunn in just a moment, who goes very wide on the exit of turn 5. And also Walsingham locked onto this battle as well, recovering after that. With a small amount of damage, I imagine, on the front of that Mercedes that sent Marco Bischoff down the order. As Noah Reid again, he's made a mistake. Obviously not very comfortable with the brake balance of the car. He's got deep on several occasions into turn 7. And apparently also someone's got a drive-through penalty as Walsingham's down the inside using the acceleration in the 23 car. A little bit of a bump to the German driver on the exit there, and he gets his way past in the Mercedes up into P12. Several car lengths now behind Samir Fock in all of that. And Samir may be looking to make a move in just a moment as well. In actual fact, need to keep an eye on several of these battles. They haven't given me a chance to breathe in this race, but that's the way we love it here in the Pro Series. George Boothby within a second now of McCormack. There they are, your race front two. Battling for the lead, make it 7/10. The gain that this Honda gets down the back stretch is monumental. I'll tell you what though, someone who's also been gaining and showing good pace is Jardier, working his way up through the order. Now a three-way fight between Luke Whitehead, Tinko van der Velde. Oh dear, as a white flag for a moment for George Boothby. I thought it all gone wrong. It seems like we're okay, but Jardier now trying to go around the outside of van der Velde towards the inner loop chicane, but he can't make anything stick just yet, and Whitehead must be sweating. Samir Fock around the outside, Mateus Gunn, Ferrari getting the job done and breaks his way in towards top 10. 4 positions gained for the number 4 car. As a three-way fight now for 6th position developing. Jardier, of course, has a championship to be thinking about right now. He's had good, consistent races overall in the early part of this season. And probably one of the most competitive starts he's had, and with the sorts of attrition that Marco Bischoff has rarely ever had in the Pro Series. Today and last week at Paul Ricard are some of his worst races on record. So remember, there are 2 drop scores for each driver per season, and Marco Bischoff not leaving himself a great deal of wiggle room in this championship to have a bad day later on in the season. Valentin Barrier has gained some momentum as well. Tell you what, it looks like these Porsches are starting to struggle because McCormack under increasing pressure from George Boothby. Still fast in the final sector. It's amazing. That gap was 3/10 at the inner loop chicane. It's back up to a second by the time they close out the lap. And the overall advantage, actually McCormack that time around by 700. So that's the difference in pace at different parts of the circuit. Van der Velde very close to the back of Whitehead. Maybe a move towards turn 1. Does he think about it? He stays behind the Porsche once more. And Jardier, he'll be watching this one very closely. Let's go on board with the Honda. Let's experience this rocket ship for ourselves and see exactly what it's like. So pit window has now opened, so 20-minute window for these drivers to make their pit stop in, and Jardier towards the outside. The Ferrari covered off, trying to give a slipstream towards Tinko. Very busy on the entry towards the inner loop chicane, and Jardier over the second apex, back across over to the third. He's going to have to jump the curb. Handful in the cockpit of that car, but he keeps it pointing in a straight line and unable to get the move done. I think that was all pretty clean and fair in all of that, but just unable to get the move done. And that would have been very awkward and scary for Van der Velde as well, who's already been victim of that chicane on at least one occasion. Battle for the final podium spot, hossing up between Karekas, Barry and Hutchinson. Might see some of these Porsches diving into the pits very soon. I think Soldatov may have just lost a position to Boris Garafulin in Yeet Esports. Aston Martin, we've also got a bit of a three-way tussle going on between Gerardish, Shuchanov and Bischoff in 15th position for the time being. But look at this at the front of the field. George Boothby. Who would have thought after McCormack with such a stellar qualifying session And George Boothby's damage on the end of lap 1. He's within half a second, and I seriously think that Boothby may have a shot at making a move stick as we get to the inner loop chicane on this next occasion, because the speed in our Honda is mighty. Let's go on board the rear diffuser of Darren McCormack and witness that Honda straight line speed. It's already gaining. They're just making their way through turn 2. Can the previous race winner here at Watkins Glen make it another victory to his tally, or will the Irishman manage to hold him off? Here comes a Honda for the battle for the race lead. George Boothby making his attack now, and he backs out of it. He hasn't got enough of an overlap. He knows it's a long race, and he decides it's better to hold back for time being. He's compromised McCormack, though, through there. And they both keep it together in the end. And in the meantime, Valentin Barrier did make up a position over Korekas. Oh, wow, and he got that done very early on. You can see has already got the position done well before the braking zone. As further down, we've got a white flag for Matthias Kuhn, very closely battling at the moment with Samir Fogg. There's so many drivers close to one another. We've got Neuwirth and Pignon who have just swapped positions. The Aston Martin, that's Gerardis going off in front. A mistake there through the chicane. Sees the Greek driver go down to 16th place. Bischoff with a huge wheelie. Unusual to see that in ACC on the exit of turn 6 there. And, turn 5. Manages to keep it pointing in a straight line. No, Reader did something very similar, actually. So the Porsche is running very low ride height by the looks of it. As Boothby, 0.4 of a second is the gap, and that's in the final sector. This is where the Porsche is quick. This is meant to be its strongest part of the circuit, and right now the Honda is absolutely pushing him all the way. When will these drivers look to pit? Who will look to go for the tyre advantage versus track position? You have to imagine that if you're in the Honda, you'll probably go for track position. The tyre advantage. Try to get that undercut, come out in front, because even if the tyres wear, if you're battling against these Porsches, you've probably got enough straight line speed at hand to hold the position. And right now, as I've gone on board the wrong front splitter, here comes George Boothby, and I don't think there is anything that Darren McCormack can do. And Boothby leads here at Watkins Glen for round 3 in the Pro Series. Can he get it done in towards the inner loop chicane? He does. And someone else has got the move done. Is Jade Hutchinson in the Ferrari, makes his way up into 4th place. A little bit wider on the exit for 3rd apex there than he would have wanted, but manages to keep it all together. So both the Canadian and the British driver making up positions there. McCormack straight back on the attack. But with the way that this pace has been swinging throughout this race so far, I'm not sure he's going to have anything to work with. Bischoff versus Chichinov down towards the inner loop chicane, but the Porsche understandably unable to do anything about the Honda in front. Almost impossible to make a move stick. White flag for Gareth Fullin. But it doesn't seem like anything too noteworthy in all of that. And look at that, McCormack already several tenths behind Jules Boothby. So Boothby really absolutely putting the pedal to the metal in all of that and breaking away from the Irishman, who had such a good opening phase of this race. The dream start, a 3-second lead, but it started to unravel as we got about 20 minutes into the race, and the tyre advantage seemed to start swinging towards the Hondas. Another car that it seems to be swinging towards as well is the likes of the Ferrari. Hutchinson right now, the lead one of the Italian outfits, has been staring at the back of Luke Whitehead's car for quite a while now, but has kept himself composed, trying to look for an opportunity. That's Van der Velde looking at the back. And he was trying to go for a move towards the inside. I don't even think he thought it was on, and he does send it towards turn 1. A little bit of confusion there, I think, on the entry, but I'll tell you what, Jarnier is going to get involved in this as well, and now Luke Whitehead has to try to defend against the mighty straight line speed of the Porsche as they head now towards the inner loop chicane. Look at Whitehead, he's definitely got a lower downforce setup than some of the other cars. Jarnier trying to bump draft Whitehead as they head towards that inner loop chicane, make it difficult for Van der Velde. How's it all going to fare in all of this? They all fly through there. Jarnier just watching, trying to see if he can pounce. Van der Velde loses a position, Whitehead recovers it, and who would have thought the Ferrari loses out to the Porsche with a little bit of help from Jarnier there, sitting, watching this, and now he tries to make a move onto Van der Velde in towards turn 6, but he can't get alongside the Ferrari in all of that. Few drivers also making their pit stops now, but Whitehead then retains 6th place for the time being. Van der Velde has to concede after Jardier trying to... You might be wondering why he ended up doing exactly what he did He was trying to see if he could stop Van der Velde escaping from Whitehead and make it possible for Jardier to make a move on the pair of them. It didn't quite work out in the way that he would have wanted to ideally, but it certainly allowed him to stay in contention with this battle. And what this now does is it keeps Luke Whitehead bottling Van der Velde up in this fight as Boothby, oh, that was very close with McCormack coming through the final corner, but Boothby does blink first out of our race leaders then. I thought he might. He doesn't want to have to regain that position. He looks like he might have enough pace in hand to maintain it as Van der Velde very close to the back of Whitehead. Jardier pitting as well, so several cars going into the pits. Hutchinson now. These Ferraris able to maintain their tyres very well. They've always tended to be a bit gentler on the tyres, and the Honda, a little bit like the Porsche, does like to wear into its tyres a bit more than some other cars. And right now, Hutchinson trying to put some pressure onto the Frenchman, and he backs out of that one in the end. Can't do anything about Valentine for the time being, who right now is having a bit of a stronger performance than what we saw overall from him last week. By no means was Paul Ricard a shabby effort from the Frenchman, but consistency in the end was not his friend, and has overall done a better job so far, but coming under firm pressure from the number 10 car now. As further down the order, Neuwirth and Gerardis battling side by side. The Aston Martin trying to go around the outside in towards the inner loop chicane, barely leaving enough space for the BMW. Wide on the exit though, has to pull it up before he gets that curb. But Gerardis almost going over the grass on the entry towards that next corner, but just about manages to get through there okay. Boothby has emerged out of the pits into some pretty clean air. What about Jardier? Of course, important for these guys going for that undercut strategy. We've also got Walsingham, Marco Bischoff, Pennon, Poznikov have all come into the pits as well as also Leonardo Porco has just come in too. So Jardier's got some clean air ahead of him as well. He'll be delighted with that. And right now, Gerardis currently putting on your closest fight on circuit. He stares at the back. Oh, as Hutchinson has made his way past Valentine as Valentine has come into the pits. So that is why that has happened. Correct has managed to close up a little bit in all of that. So I have to see whereabouts Valentine filters out from the pits in all of that. But right now, Hutchinson should be able to hold Korekis off for the time being. He does seem to be in one of the faster cars in those lead groups. And McCormack now trying to see if he can use tyre advantage later on in the race to outpace the Honda of George Boothby, who seems very confident in managing to keep those tyres alive up until the end. And he recently got into the effective race lead, or into the race lead, excuse me, and has decided to blink quite early on. We'll have to see whether or not that works for him later on. Thomas Morant briefly brought out a yellow flag. He's just made his way into the pits. So nothing too dramatic and all of that. Soltov trying to make a move on the Yeet Esports Aston Martin of Marco Schada as they fly down towards the inner loop chicane once more. Side by side, Soltov towards that inside line. Can he make it stick? Marco Schada not making it easy. Contact between the pair of them. Schada across the grass. Gareth Fullin trying to get involved in all of this, almost pushing him through the second apex. Only losing one position in the end of Schada. Gareth Fullin flashing lights. I'm not sure there's anything really Schada could do. We've seen how deadly that chicane can be. And really, you are quite the passenger at times. So I think just desperately trying to do his best to maintain position. As Noah Eder has also come into the pits further down the order, as a few other drivers have too. Also, just going to have a quick look at the lovely list as... oh, this is interesting. So Jardier has come out just a couple of tenths behind Tinko van der Velde, who has recently made his pit stop. So the undercut hasn't quite worked for Jardier, but what it has done is it's removed any sort of slipstream for the Ferrari that he was getting from Luke Whitehead. Gerardis fighting back Marco Bischoff and holding on to 24th position for the time being, as Luke Whitehead, McCormack, Korekis, Hutchinson, Shins all come into the pits as well. Neuwirth, Grande, Steinbrenner, several drivers all coming in at this moment in time, and Jardier not quite able to pounce maybe as quickly as I would have expected. Those tyres would have been in a bit of a better temperature window as well. So interesting to see that the Ferrari's managed to hold its own on the outlap, but we'll have to see on that first drag race towards the inner loop chicane how he fares in all of that. And also, George Boothby has just gone through there. And McCormack, how far back is he? About 2 seconds is the disadvantage for the Porsche at the moment, and only a couple of seconds actually adrift of McCormack is the likes of Barrier, Hutchinson and Karekas, who are all very close to one another in all of that. All these battles immediately heating up just one lap after they've all emerged from the pits. And Jardier now trying to make a move onto Van der Velde around the outside. The Honda goes, he's made it work before. Has he got enough of an overlap this time? Van der Velde sending it through the first apex, braking as late as he dares, using those fresh tyres, a good measure to fend off Honda, and he does do it beautifully. Now what about Marco Bischoff staring at the back of the BMW once more? Oh dear, as it's all kicking off further down the order. I don't think Marco Bischoff can do anything in all of that. Meanwhile, we've got Yana Grande and Patrick Pignon going side by side. As Luke Anderson just ahead of them. I think the Audi is going to have the legs on the Porsche down this back stretch and able to make that one stick. Leonardo Porco also close up to the back of Thomas Morant and trying to go around the outside of another one of the Porsches, side by side in towards that chicane. Tricky through there. Good, respectful racing room from the pair of them, and very respectful actually from both drivers there. And Thomas Morant holding on to that position as Gerardis has also closed up to the back of Neuwirth, which is making this a little bit of a four-way fight as some of our remaining drivers come into the pits. 7 minutes left of the pit window to go, as Jardier, I think, has just made his way past Tinko van der Velde, so I have to see how that happened. Unusually seems to have got it done in the final sector, so maybe a mistake from the Ferrari driver wide on the exit. That's not where seemingly he ended up losing the position. So whereabouts did it go wrong for Van der Velde? Also, notably, Luke Whitehead seems to have come out well behind. There was a mistake. Van der Velde went very deep into turn 11. Nothing that he could do against Jardier. And in actual fact, that was Luke Whitehead just going into the pits in front. So, did Luke Whitehead have a drive-through penalty? He's out of the pits very quickly. It does look to me like he may have just gone straight through the pit, so I think Whitehead, and yet confirmation in the chat, thank you Penta for that. So Whitehead, after being involved in so many battles, has a drive-through penalty that he ends up serving, and that's going to drop him down the order, no doubt. 3.2 seconds is now the gap at the front of the field. George Boothby, your effective race leader, as our remaining drivers come into the pits. McCormack, P2, Barrier, P3, Hutchinson, P4, with Krantas Karekas in hot pursuit just behind, but is going to have a tough time, particularly later on in that stint. We imagine that the Ferrari's tyre management will come into good effect, and Van der Velde has dropped away from Jardier now in all of that. Also crucially in terms of the championship fight for Jardier, Marek Shins has got a car between himself and Jardier, so that will be helping the Czech driver extend his championship lead. His next nearest competitor was Karppinen, who is further down the order, and after that is Hutchinson, who is in a pretty good spot at the moment in effective P4, and is still very much up there on the points total. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out for the Ferrari driver, who's continuing to have a very solid and consistent season. It's so far reminding me a bit of what Karekas managed in Season 8. It hasn't quite been up there so far to compete for a race win, but has certainly been very consistent throughout. So great stuff him, still maintaining the fastest lap of the race for the time being. Although interestingly, George Boothby last time around did a 43.0, which would have been 0.3 faster than that fastest lap, and he must have invalidated it in some way. So, and he's got to be careful. If he's got an invalidation, that's a possible track limit warning. And we've already seen Luke Whitehead suffer that fate. And Marco Bischoff getting a very early drive-through at Paul Ricard last week. So very easily done for some of these drivers, despite their immense talent in this grid. Marco Bischoff continuing to try to push on, but is stuck right now behind the BMW of Manos Gerardis. Matthias Kuhn right on the back and almost a bit too close for comfort there. I think had to go a bit wide onto the entry of that braking zone to avoid the back of that Ferrari, but hanging back for the time being. So we'll keep an eye on that for a moment. Again, I'm going to try, if I do love the action in these Pro Series, but whenever I try to look at something of interest. All I want is just 30 seconds, but these drivers, as Marco Bischoff, he's going to do it again, isn't he? Marco Bischoff, I think, sending an attack, not quite onto Gerardis down towards turn 8, and having to maintain position for the time being. So I'm going to daringly look at the wonderful steward sheet that has been put together during this race so far and see if we can have a bit of an update on any penalty situations that may have occurred. You may have to bear with me for just a couple of moments because it's my first time using this and it is a live document. I don't want to explode anything for the stewards, so I shall have a quick look. So several penalties actually being dished out. We see a 15-second penalty for the 31 car. That was quite early on in the race. That was for... who was that for? That was for Boris Garafulin. So his day has been rather busy at multiple moments. As Grande actually maybe about to make a move onto the BMW. Luke Anderson siding one way and then the other, trying to find a gap. The BMW pretty good in a straight line, but the Audi fighting around the outside. Can he make it stick? Not quite. Anderson able to hold on to that one for the time being. We'll have to find another opportunity elsewhere. We'll keep an eye also on Matthias Gunn as he kicks up a bit of dust in his hot pursuit of Samir Fock. Also got the number 32 car has received a penalty. Trying to track down who that is in this race. That's Nico Pennanen, who I think may have got that penalty for that instant earlier on. I believe that may have been down towards turn 11, if I remember rightly. We've also got penalties for the 14 and 12 for forcing another driver off the track. One of those was for Matis Lateo, who has since retired from the race by the looks of it. And the number 12 car, who is that on my leaderboard? Number 12 is... I can't find number 12. I wonder if that was Redwan Mesaoud, who one of our drivers that was retired. Oh, actually, excuse me. No, that's Marco Schada that is actually still outside the front. So stretching out that pit stop as far as he possibly dares, and is going to have to come in on this next lap, I do believe, because he's not leaving too much to work with. Also, just keeping an eye on McCormack versus George Boothby. A very similar pace between them once again, and brought it down by a couple of tenths, but 3 seconds is the gap between George Boothby and McCormack. And with the pace that Valentine right now is showing, fastest of the pair of them right now, the Frenchman trying to make a resurgence towards, well, I say towards the podium, he's already in a podium position, but trying to see if he can get further up, now within a second of the Irishman in front. So valiant recovery drive so far from the number 9 car, and still very much within a chance of victory if it goes pear-shaped for George Boothby later on. Schada does come into the pits, so the racing order will resume into what it's effectively is. Marco Bischoff trying again to get an overlap with Gerardis. This is where he's quick, but he just can't get alongside enough on the Greek driver, who makes that BMW continuously very, very wide and is able to hold back the two-time reigning champions. Good driving from the man that had a bit of a troublesome time. In actual fact, maybe not exactly vengeful, of course, by any stretch of the imagination from Gerardis, but it was contact with Bischoff at Paul Ricard that did send him flying off at the end of the back straight. So I'm sure that he'll be grinning a little bit as he keeps behind that Porsche around this circuit, and is doing it very nicely indeed at the moment. White flag briefly for Patrick Pignon. Did he make a mistake? He was alongside the Audi towards turn 10, and then what happened there? Absolutely nothing. The leaderboard just completely lied. It was just the Audi carrying great momentum. That was Yano Grande on the outside of turn 10 and able to make the position stick. Matthias Kuhn unable to make his way past Samir Fock still, and as we look on board the rear diffuser of Manos Gerardis in this BMW, still Marco Bischoff unable to get past, absolutely glued to the back of that car, but still unable to do anything about it. We also had some penalties for the number 30 car and number 15, for which were 10-second time penalties for some collisions. So they are for which driver that's for. Yano Grande is one of them, and the other is Patrick Pignon. So actually the two that were battling on circuits not long ago have equal penalties. So they should be able to continue their net squabble for position despite those changes in their overall finishing time. Those penalties I think may have been served actually during their pit stop, because I think they were dished out early enough in the race for them to be tagged on to the pit stop. Matthias Kuhn continuing to try to put pressure onto Samuel Fock as he goes very wide. Oh dear! Oh, it's about the fourth time I've done that today, and it's to another one of the Porsche drivers. Apologies to the German. Matthias Kuhn pushing very hard, trying to get everything out of his Porsche, and in the process slamming the wall on the exit of turn 11 and has given himself a bit of damage in the process. Also notably, the last time around, George Boothby extending his advantage over McCormack just by a couple of tenths, but important tenths indeed. Whereas meanwhile, Valentine, same pace as the race leader and able to close in just a tad. So the Frenchman still very much involved in that fight. Marco Bischoff staring still at the back of the BMW. Let's have a look further through some of these penalties. Unfortunately, I do have to go quiet every now and again because with my push to talk starts typing into the sheet at great speed, and I don't want to ruin any of the steward's work, but at the same time I do want to try to keep you up to date on everything that's going on. Yano Grande trying to once more to make a move around the outside of Addison. Braver effort this time around. Forces a side-by-side. Oh, big slide in the middle of the apex. Pignon trying to get involved in this one as well. Side-by-side still as they head through in towards turn 5 there. The Porsche trying to see if he can capitalize on this side-by-side action. Brilliant racing between the two German cars. The third lurking behind. Yano Grande forcing the issue. Oh, as Patrick Pignon almost sends himself around over the curb. Luke Addison flashing lights, not happy about it, trying to send a move up the inside in towards toe corner, but can't make anything stick there. I'm not sure what he was unhappy about. I think maybe felt the door was a bit slammed through shoot corner, and then Pignon flashing the lights actually to Luke Addison. So no one happy with how anyone was driving, but it was Yano Grande, the Spaniard, that made the move up in the end. McCormack gaining 3 tenths on Boothby last time around, so Boothby not out of the woods just yet, and Valentine sticking with him as well. So those two drivers closing up right now as this fight, four-way fight, almost as Gerardis. Oh, that's going to compromise his line through there and give an opportunity to Bischoff, who has nowhere to go. He's trying to carry that momentum, but just absolutely nothing that he can do. Also, thank you to the mods for dealing with the unwanted invasion. Carpenter around the outside of Noarida towards the inner loop chicane, and the BMW makes that one stick as Neuwirth now side by side with Shuchinov and trying to go around the outside. Does he? Oh, big jumper, because it's jumped for all of them, and Neuwirth wide, Shuchinov wide, Gerardis trying to go around the outside, Bischoff as well. Gerardis makes it stick. Can Bischoff follow through? He might have the momentum if he can fight it. He's trying desperately to see if he can make it stick. They disappearing over the crest. Neuwirth stuck on the outside, and I don't think it's going to help him out, so he loses 2 positions in one. Shuchinov, I think, may have actually caught Neuwirth off guard, maybe using another driver as a braking point, which is never a good idea, because if they make a mistake, then you will end up having the consequences from that as well if you follow them. So yeah, Bischoff able to make up 1 position, so joyfully for him not having another car with greater straight line speed stuck in front of him, and continues to push on, trying to get past Gerardis. So frustrating inside the cockpit of that number 1 car. Clearly has the pace, but just doesn't have the straight line speed. Maybe still carrying some of that damage from early on. He may not have repaired it because it wasn't the biggest of impacts, but certainly would be losing him a bit of performance right now. And of course, the latest BOP changes will be hurting all of the Porsches around here. Again, George Boothby slow on the last lap, 43.6, 4 tenths the advantage to McCormack. So McCormack gaining in all of this. Matthias Kuhn is trying to put some pressure onto Samuel Fock once again, absolutely glued to the back of the Ferrari. Makes the move out of the slipstream as late as he possibly can. Sam is very late on the brakes though. How do they fare through the chicane? Can the Ferrari make it safely through there? Matthias Kuhn trying to send it down towards the inside at turn 5, but Samuel holds on strong, but he's gone wide onto the marbles. Momentum in favour of a number 6 car. Now now looking towards the left, looking towards the right, around the outside. The number 6 and making it work almost. Samit has to give it room, but he manages to out-accelerate him on the exit. Amazing racing from these two on the battle for 9th position. Mateus Good now all the way around the outside he goes, but I don't think again. He's tried that move a few times, but there's just no grip out there. It's incredibly hard to make a mistake. The amounts of overlap you need to go around the outside there is so much more than you would think, but great stuff there for the battle for P9. Marco Bischoff still staring at the back of Gerardis in the BMW and unable to make anything happen for the time being. We also had a penalty for the number 23 car for that was a 15-second penalty for causing a collision. So that was to Aidan Walsingham, involved in all that madness that we had in the mid-pack a little bit earlier, and then also a 5-second penalty for the number 8 car. So the number 8 car belongs to Konstantin Soldatov, so a bit further down the order and not holding on to the greatest of results here today for the man that is quite high in terms of ELO rating. Aston Martin maybe not suiting him all too much. White flags out for a couple of drivers. Oh dear! Yellow flag! Oh, yellow flag for Hutchinson! Hutchinson has made a mistake, I do believe, at the chicane. Also, again, McCormack gaining a lot of time. 2 seconds now. Less than that. 1.7 is the gap between himself and George Boothby. And also Shins as well. So what on earth has happened to these two? So we're trying to catch them both. So Jade Hutchinson was running quite happily in P5. Through the chicane he goes, and then just clips too much of the curb onto the grass. Big slide once more for the Ferrari. Holds onto it. And now Marek Shins just comes to a complete stop. So I have no idea what's happened there for Shins. He's got going again. I don't know if he's had a hardware issue or what exactly, because he definitely hasn't made another pit stop. But Marek Shins, a man that's fighting with Jardier for the championship right now, has dropped several positions in the process, down to P12. He goes. Neuwirth all over back of Marco Bischoff, who's dropped a little bit away for the first time in a while from the BMW of Gerardis. I'll tell you what, though, the fight up at the front of the field is heating up. Look at that gap. 4/10 in favour of McCormack again. I wonder if Boothby has made a mistake with his tyre pressures in his second stint, because right now, definitely not showing the same sort of advantage he had in the long run. Of course, fresher tyres on McCormack's car, but it's not going to be easy to make a move stick past that Honda, and he's got Valentine to worry about as well, who is getting ever closer, and the Frenchman desperate to try to make up for last week at Paul Ricard. Jardier and all of that will have gained a bit of time towards Hutchinson, who is one of his other championship rivals right now in these early stages, so that's something to keep an eye on. Marco Bischoff trying to make a move down towards turn 1 once again, but unable to do anything about the BMW in front. Keeps that good momentum out of the corner, but I just don't think he's going to have anything to work with. We'll also have a look at Mateus Kuhn versus Samuel Fock. They stay as they were. Gerardis actually gaining very quickly to the back of Shuchnov. Here's the onboard from the diffuser of the car. Sits in 13th place. The BMW trying to go around the outside. I don't think he'll be able to make that one stick. They get through there cleanly this time round. Yellow flag for Van der Velde, who seems to be in a bit of an awkward place there. Did he go wide? Oh dear! Oh, it's a huge moment for Van der Velde. 360 for the number 22 car as well. So caught on the grass on the exit of Chute Corner there, and pays several consequences and all of that. So big losses for Tinko, as these drivers in the battle for 13th place have maintained position, as Shuchnov goes wide through toe corner, and Manuel Gerardis now trying to make the move stick. Drag race, here we are on board the BMW. There's the acceleration from the Honda, fighting back though. Gerardis surely on this inside line can make it stick. The Honda brakes very late around the outside, holds position. Marco Bischoff desperate to make a move past all of this. Neuwirth getting involved as well. Neuwirth can't make anything stick. Marco Bischoff still staring at the back of that BMW. Amazing stuff though from Shuchnov after that mistake at turn 7, excuse me. Able to fight back around the outside in a very difficult braking zone. Marco Bischoff continuing to try carrying momentum through the sequence of corners and try to use that pace advantage in these high-speed commitment corners to get past the BMW, but still just unable to make anything happen. Also closing in on all of this, we've got the likes of Walsingham in the Mercedes. Luke Whitehead close up to the back of him now as well. That'd be interesting. He has got better straight line speed than some of these other Porsches. And Marco Bischoff almost shutting the door on Neuwirth. I thought that was going to be major contact number 2 for Bischoff there. But the Aston Martin now alongside. I'm not sure if there's anything that Marco Bischoff can do as the Aston goes around the outside. Walsingham having to defend from Luke Whitehead, but holds onto position for the time being by the looks of it, and he does. But Marco Bischoff then, after staring at the back of the Greek driver's car for such a long time, ends up actually dropping a position as Neuwirth tries to recover. Walsingham immediately having to defend from Whitehead, who is very, very quick. White flag for Pignon as well. Not sure if that was a moment through the chicane for him. We'll keep an eye on this train of cars because these drivers all scrapping right now. I do just have a quick look. Look at this battle for the top 3. McCormack now within a second of George Boothby. 7/10 quicker than Boothby last time round. So there is a major loss of pace for George Boothby, and I'm not quite sure how he's lost so much performance in this latter part of the race. But McCormack, after it all looked like it was going wrong, now very much within a chance of fighting position. But if he doesn't get past quickly and those two squabble, the Frenchman, the man that had the win slip out of his hands last week at Paul Ricard, he'll be right there to try to capitalise on any misfortune that either of those drivers have, and he is looking very racy at the moment. Matthias Kuhn still unable to do anything about Samuel Fock. Neuwirth versus Gerardis down the inside at turn 1. Drives on the outside in the BMW, trying to fight the Aston Martin. It's getting very busy once more, and we're going to have another drag race. Shuchanov's been able to escape in all of this by the looks of it. Max Shin's actually as well, also making a move on Noah Reid. I think it's going to be an easy drag race for the Aston Martins. He looks to recover after what we think is a hardware issue. Bischoff losing out to Walsingham on the outside. Nothing the German driver can do. Whitehead has dropped back. Gerardis trying to fight back on Neuwirth towards the inner loop chicane, but he can't make it done. So Walsingham and Neuwirth making up positions on the run towards the inner loop. Slide for the number 37 car. And now he's got the Mercedes all over his gearbox. Let's go on board the Mercedes. We don't hear this V8 roar all too often. And launching an attack down the inside. It's a firm attack at that. Trying to scythe past the BMW, and he's forced the issue. Walsingham side by side with Gerardis now towards toe corner, and he's on the outside line as well. It's going to be difficult to make that one stick, and I think Marco Bischoff might have something to say about this on the cutback as well, as he now tries to out-accelerate the Mercedes, but the Mercedes got the straight line speed, but he's got nowhere to go. He wants to move to the right-hand side, and he can. Bang down the inside, 3 wide, look wild! Oh, a contact there! Gerardis almost sent around, just about keeps it together. Marco Bischoff side by side on the exit of turn 8 there. Luke Whitehead trying to get involved in this one as well. Almost contact with Bischoff, who's still on the outside of the BMW. Walsingham through. Gerardis loses the place, but still holds off Marco Bischoff. Flashing of the light from the Greek driver. Not happy about how all that played out. And now he's got 2 Porsches that he needs to try to keep behind, but also at the front of the field. Look at this. Only 4/10 now between George Boothby and Darren McCormack. That gap is closing all the time. Boothby, very little pace in comparison to what he had early on to try to fend off those the Porsche and the Honda of Valentine in these closing stages. I still haven't made my way through the penalty list, but I'm just not getting an opportunity. These guys keeping me on my toes every step of the way. And again, I need to have a look at the race lead, because look at this, 2/10, 3/10 is the gap between McCormack and George Boothby. We know the Honda is quick in a straight line, but right now with the pace that McCormack has got, one would have to assume that he is going to be in a position to pounce Neuwirth versus Shuchanov once more. And a little bit of a jump over grass, and also for Marco Bischoff, he gets it all wrong. Loses out to Luke Whitehead. Steinbrenner nowhere to go in all of that as well. And so multiple moments for drivers through there. Yana Grande unable to make anything stick either. But now we've got the fight for the race lead. It's a Honda sandwich for Darren McCormack. But after seeing the race lead disappear from him, he is absolutely on the tail of the Honda, who really hasn't had the pace in the second half of the race. But Valentine's right there in the mix as well. And he's only half a second behind. And I'll tell you what, I think Valentine may be well able to make a move stick in just a moment. Steinbrenner's got past Marco Bischoff, but I can't have a look at it because let's have a look from Valentine's point of view, because I think Boothby, he'll have the straight line speed to hold off the Porsche surely down this stretch. But what has Valentine got under the boot of that car? where that Honda engine is placed, gaining all the time. Big double slipstream effect for the Frenchman, and he actually decides to hold back for the time being, trying to be patient. Big jump over the curb for McCormack there. Got to be careful, and he's had a bit of a wiggle through the inner loop chicane there. It's going to give a bit of breathing space for George Boothby as we enter the final 20 minutes of this race. It's George Boothby leads, McCormack second, Valentine Barrier in third place, and these three absolutely pushing each other to the absolute limit. McCormack and Barrier trying to go for their first wins in the Pro Series. It'd be a dream debut for McCormack if he could convert the pole and his first race in the Pro Series into a win, but they've got George Boothby, the man that's mastered Watkins Glen in the past, to try to contend with, as swapping of positions with Addison and Pignon as well, who's got Marco Schada, who I believe will get past pretty easily in a moment. Luke Whitehead using that extra straight line speed on his Porsche setup to get past the BMW of Gerardis, making it look easy in comparison to what Bischoff was able to respond with for the majority of the race. Walsingham has, oh dear, oh, big contact there further down the order between Walsingham and Neuwirth, but it looks a bit side by side through turn 6. Oh, a bit of a weird overlap there, almost a bit of netcode. It looks like both of the cars merged through one another, and 360 for Walsingham on the exit. Back up at the front though, it's McCormack still staring at the back of the Honda of George Boothby down towards turn 1, but again, surely not going to have the straight line speed to be able to contend with the pace of that Honda down the back stretch, and Valentine lurking just behind menacingly the Frenchman. He had it slip away from him last week, and as he closes in down this back stretch, he's not closing in as quickly as he would have wanted because Boothby is giving that slipstream to McCormack, but now is he going to make his move? Not quite. He decides to hold back for the time being and slows up, allows McCormack to regather himself, and he makes a mistake. In actual fact, it's a Barrier continuing to put McCormack under pressure, but he's got to be careful about this because if those two scrap too much, George Boothby will be able to extend his advantage, and Barrier may not be able to close in. But look at McCormack, those fresher tyres, and the Porsche is strong in this part of the circuit, putting huge amounts of pressure onto him. Solstov down the inside of Marco Bischoff, who goes from bad to worse. Yana Grande, I think, about to make a move on the drag race down that back stretch as well. Oh, what's happened? Oh, it's all kicked off at the front. George Boothby and McCormack have made contact. It's all kicked off from the field. We looked away for a split second, and Boothby and McCormack have made contact. Valentine Barrier leads the way. McCormack has given the place back. So is this a bit of a dive from McCormack in towards toe corner? What has happened there? McCormack, oh, very late on the brakes, completely wipes out the back of George Boothby's car. Centre around there, McCormack taking responsibility immediately and conceding the position to George Boothby. But what this all means is the man that was being patient, the man that had it slip away at Paul Ricard, Valentine Barrier, the Frenchman, leads this race with 16 minutes to go. And right now, with 3.5 seconds to Grantis Correcas, is this finally the time it comes good for the Frenchman, who has been in such fine form over the last couple of seasons? Had a stellar drive here in the Ferrari, working his way up all the way through the order, and wasn't able, he was fastest car on track, but not able to go for a race win. That was George Boothby's day. But I'll tell you what, right now, for the number 9 car, things are looking pretty good. And right now, we have Valentine Barrier, Correcas, Hutchinson as your podium positions. What an amazing sequence of drivers as McCormack and Boothby come together. Big mistake from the Irishman, and Boothby paying the price. I'd love to speak to the pair of them in all of that. I'm sure there'll be a shake of the head from Boothby in the cockpit of that car as Whitehead makes his way down the inside towards turn 1. But that wouldn't have happened if as Marco Bischoff comes into pits. So I think it's another drive-through for the German driver. That's 2 races in a row. Absolute disaster for the 2-time back-to-back Pro Series champion, whose chances of making it a three titles to his name goes further and further down the pan. He started the season strong with a win at Silverstone, but these are effectively going to be his 2 drop scores. It would have to be pretty, we'd have to have a bit of a shocker elsewhere if they were to be demoted by anything else. But disaster there for Marco Bischoff, and really not helping his chances of making a 3rd title on the bounce. McCormack immediately back on the charge, closing in on Boothby. Boothby really did lose so much pace. As there's a yellow flag somewhere, that's Leonardo Porco and Florian Duakov. What has happened there? Chaos further down the field. So this is Florian Duakov gaining in the Mercedes, understandably, by the looks of it. down the backstretch towards the inner loop chicane, and Porco defending that inside line. Mercedes around the outside he goes in that Unicorn's livery. Car contact on the entry. Oh dear! Oh, and several collisions involved in all of that. Porco then backwards in the middle of the chicane, and has to commit to a bit of a round the houses approach with that one, because I don't think you can actually get through on the other side of the barrier. Meanwhile, Valentin extending his advantage over Carreras, so it's looking good for the Frenchman. Meanwhile, McCormack, 0.3 of seconds, as now battling Samir trying to go around the outside of the wounded Van der Velde after that big mistake. Samir around the outside he goes, 2 Ferraris through the scariest part of the circuit for this car. A little bit of door bang, and Mateus Good says thank you very much, and follows Samir through in all of that and gains a place in the process. So Tinko losing out and dropping to P9. Both of the Williams Esports guys having a bit of a troublesome day overall. McCormack still glued to the back of George Boothby, but I imagine that he will be hit with a big penalty for that incident. So I imagine that Boothby, unless he loses a lot of time, will likely be able to reclaim that position post-race. We may not get the exact penalty by the end of the race because with so much going on up and down the grid, and I imagine it's difficult enough for me to keep track of, let alone the stewards trying to evaluate all of these incidents as well. And Mateus Kuhn still close to the back of Samit. This is a sector where he is very, very quick. Same for Darren McCormack. As towards turn 1 they go again. But I imagine even with the extra damage that Boothby is now carrying, probably alongside the damage that I imagine went unrepaired from the opening part of the race, will have a bit of a loss in straight line speed compared to what he would naturally be getting. But I still don't think that entirely explains the pace loss that he's had in this race. I feel like something may have happened with tyre pressures, because look, McCormack really sticking with him on the run up towards the inner loop chicane, and the pair of them getting through there okay. What about Mateus Kuhn trying to see if he can make his way past. Samiri's been hunting around the back of this Ferrari for a very long time, but unable to make anything stick in all of that. It's a hop over the curb and a slide for the German driver, but he does all keep it pointing in a straight line for the time being. As we'll have a bit of a look back towards McCormack versus Boothby, and I'm going to try to see if I can have a bit more of a peek at the penalty situation. If Luke Whitehead doesn't make a move onto Shuchinov in the next few corners, and I think with a hop over the curb like that, I think we may be safe. Mateus Kuhn actually going wide at toe corner himself, so he will drop back. And so closest battle on circuit at the moment right now overall, by the looks of it, is still Boothby versus McCormack. I'm going to have a quick gander at the penalty situation if I can. So there's a penalty for the 39 car. That was Alessio Mellis. We didn't quite see that. And then 2 10-second penalties for the number 18. That is for Steinbrenner. We didn't quite catch that with everything else that has been going on. And then also a 10-second penalty for the number 20 car, which is Darren McCormack. So 10 seconds. As long as Boothby, if he does get overtaken, stays 10 seconds. Within 10 seconds of McCormack, he will reclaim that position. Also, 1.5 seconds between Hutchinson and Carreras. The gap has been maintained between Barrier and Carreras at the front of the field, but Hutchinson lurking right now and maybe still able to capitalise in the final 10 minutes to make a move happen. McCormack unable to do anything as Whitehead and Shuchinov side by side. Whitehead down the inside towards turn 1. We know he's got better straight line speed than most in that Porsche. That's the approach he took for today, which has allowed him to make up some of these positions, but it hasn't given him the overall most competitive of race pace. And will he end up losing out to Shuchinov in the drag race towards the inner loop chicane? Honda gaining in the slipstream that we've come to expect, but not able to get past Luke Whitehead there. So you can see that's how much of a difference the setup has been for the British driver. Currently now in 13th place, but not where he would have wanted to have been overall. McCormack still sitting in P5. Also got Dradis versus Neuwirth once more. And Also a bit of a close battle going on right now between Gareth Fullen and Thomas Morans. Gareth Fullen down the inside in the Aston Martin. Also, I think Nico Pennon just got something done on the outside. Leonardo Porco, who is very wounded in that car. The BMW easily makes his way through turn 3 and 4 and overtakes the Italians' rather battle-scarred vehicle. McCormack again in the slipstream on the way down to the inner loop chicane. And C does seem to be, he's pretty much marginal with the straight line speed of George Boothby, and in fact gaining just a smidge, but showing a bit of caution as they hop over those big curves on the inside of that chicane. Absolutely chucks the car left and right when you fly through there, and carrying big momentum on the exit on board the diffuser with Boothby for just a moment. This is where it all went wrong on the run towards Toe Corner a few laps ago. On that three-way fight that we had starting to emerge, McCormack outbraking himself, thinking about the same move down the inside. That's brave when it's gone wrong before, and there wasn't really much of an overlap there, and hasn't been able to make it stick. Also, importantly, Jardier within 5 seconds of McCormack here, so he's likely to benefit from the penalty. And of course, bearing in mind, George Boothby and Jardier teammates within Yas Heat. So George Boothby obviously will reclaim that position by the looks of it from McCormack if he does get by him, but he'll want to hold him up as much as possible just to make sure he can sneak in a little bit of benefit to his fellow teammate. Matthias Kuhn still unable to do anything about Samir. Also, a couple of other penalties dished out. A 10-second penalty for the number 19 car. So who is that on our leaderboard? That is... I can't see the number 19 car unless I'm having a complete moment on my leaderboard. I don't seem to have a number 19 car, so I can only imagine maybe they've retired from the session, maybe further down the order, and hasn't gone the way that they would have wanted, and has decided to call it quits in the closing stages of the race. As McCormack continues to try to make his way past George Boothby in the closing stages, but after this is part of the circuit where he's been very quick, lines up massive drive on the exit. Also, Karekas actually on that last lap closed in a few tenths over Valentine, who's maybe losing a little bit of pace now in the last stages of this race. And in actual fact, it was Hutchinson that was fastest of the trio. 1.2 seconds now the gap between himself and second place. So still trying to see if he can make his way up further onto the podium. Walsingham versus Steinbrenner has swapped around by the looks of the Mercedes driver fighting his way back, and they head towards that inner loop chicane, and Walsingham hops over the curb and uses that straight line speed to his advantage and ends up making his way past in the process. So up to 17th the Mercedes driver goes, as we now close in on almost the final 5 minutes of this race. McCormack still glued to the back of George Boothby. Gaps being maintained at the front of the field. Fastest lap of the race still with Hutchinson. We did see Boothby putting a lap that was faster, but it must have been invalidated in some way. So fastest legal lap of this race, a 43.5 from the Canadian that currently sits in P3. In actual fact, it'll be pretty close between himself and Jardier, I think, in terms of points after this race. We'll have to see how that plays out if we get the results through soon enough. But limited time for Hutchinson to go any further. In actual fact, I think Jardier should hold on to the championship lead, as that's a mistake from McCormack over the chicane and wide in that final apex and catching the grass. But Jardier likely to be promoted to 5th place in this race after McCormack's penalty. So do believe that Jardier will maintain the lead of the championship, and with other big rival competitors having a disaster of a day, some of them, he will certainly be in a position. He'll be pretty happy overall. Maybe not the outright pace he would have wanted to have shown around here, but certainly benefiting from the losses other drivers have had in what has been a very busy race. Gerardis trying to put pressure on Neuwirth, unable to make anything stick. What about Yana Grande? He goes down the inside of Soldatov. Big jumps over the grass, so making all 3 pieces of the grass, and Soldatov going to dive towards the inside, is he? He doesn't in the end. I'm not sure he might have something to say about the Audi holding on to that position. I mean, stellar effort from Yana Grande to hold on to the car and not lose it over that very bumpy ride, but potentially gained an advantage by going off track. In all of that, I think would be the argument from Solsolf. So I have to see whether or not the stewards or the number 8 car has anything to say about that post-race. But the Audi gets through for the time being. Boothby continuing to hold off McCormack. And it's been an interesting day for these two. Boothby came from pretty far back, came from a 3-second deficit to then overtaking, claim the lead, had a 3-second advantage of his own, and then had no pace in the second half of the race for one reason or another. I say no pace, of course, in just about any other server, Boothby would have been destroying the field. But this is the Pro Series, where everything counts, and just like that, it's small errors like that we're going to allow McCormack to get involved again. He has a wide moment, though, as the back of that Porsche drifts around through turn 5 there. So the pair of them absolutely scrabbling to try to get every ounce of grip and speed that they can. Also, Hutchinson has done some good laps over the last couple. 44.3 and a 44.4 for our top 2. Hutchinson, 43.8. Absolutely on a mission. It's a man in a Ferrari and maybe a little bit too late for the race victory, but certainly in a position to maybe do something about Grantis Correcas for P2, which would be a great result for the Canadian if he could make his way up into that spot there. Up 6 positions is the Canadian driver. Let's actually have a look and see how all of that has played out. So, Valentine to get to where he is, 4 positions gained. Correcas has stayed, 6 for Jaid in 3rd place. Losses for Boothby and McCormack, of course. Jardier gaining 5, Samir 7, Kuhn 5 as well. Karpinen 5 positions as well. Neuwirth up 14, a big mover. Steinbrenner 19, Solstov 18, Schade 13. So a lot of drivers really benefiting in this race today from the misfortune of others who have managed to kind of put themselves in a position to capitalise. Couple of minutes left, and I think a couple of laps to go overall for Valentine to try to bring this one home. McCormack still trying to make a move onto George Boothby, but can't do anything about the British driver in front. But look at Jaid Hutchinson, absolutely is closing in on Correcas. Gained 3/10 last round. Oh, and it's all gone wrong. Heavy impact, and that's the worst one he's had yet. So far, he managed to avoid contact on the exit of the inner loop chicane, and another camera curse from myself. And now he just needs to try to limp that car home, and I think hold on to P3. He should be okay, unless the steering is really badly damaged on that car, as Schade now looks to go down the inside of Soldatov there. Correcas will breathe a sigh of relief. Schade does successfully in the ET Sports car get himself up into 20th position. And then we've also got Patrick Pignon trying to make his way past Luke Anderson. Straight line speed, though, going to be with that BMW, which will make things a little bit tough for the number 30 car behind. Meanwhile, McCormack still hunting around the back of Boothby, who now has a potential to do battle with Hutchinson. They are losing time, but I don't think they're gaining... Oh, excuse me, Hutchinson is losing time to Boothby, but I think they're gaining quick enough for him to be put at risk. Valentine has just started the final lap of the race, so one more lap around this Watkins Glen circuit for the Frenchman to bring home his maiden victory that's been so tantalisingly close in recent times for the Frenchman. Walsingham trying to make moves onto Gerardis. Pignon still on the back of the BMW of Luke Anderson. Let's see, though, Valentine... I almost want to pull away because the camera curse has been so powerful, but how's he fared through the inner loop chicane for the final time? Over the first apex, the second, the third. He gets through there cleanly. That's the worst of the circuit, Valentine. and half a lap to go for him to try to bring it home. Big hops of aggression over those curbs for McCormack as he desperately tries to push on and see if he can go past Boothby on this very final lap. It's not really going to make a difference for him in the end, but he is desperately trying to make it happen. Boothby now having to defend that inside line, and this is where McCormack has been incredibly quick every point in this race, and he's still hassling the back of Boothby. Does he think about a dive here? He can't. He just can't get the overlap there on the number 5 car in front of him, and he may have to settle for what I think will be P6 in the end after his post-race penalty will be applied. Doesn't look like he'll be able to make his way past as Walsingham and Gerardis just swapped around on the very final lap. Walsingham gets through, but it's all about this man's day, the number 9 car, Valentine. He was leading at Paul Ricard last week in round 2 after stellar drive in mixed conditions. It all went wrong, but he was patient this time. He had his own moments, and he's bounced back in amazing style to take a win here in the Pro Series for Valentine. Korekis is going to finish second. Hutchinson's going to round out the podium. A big fight between Boothby and McCormack that's arguably put Valentine in that position to capitalise, has dropped them into 4th and 5th respectively. Neuwirth has lost several positions in these closing stages. What on earth has happened there? He was all by himself, and there's major damage on the front of that car over the curbs. Oh, and that's what we saw happen to Bischoff, but just not in his quite dramatic style, and ping-pongs his way left and right across the circuit. Somehow everyone avoids him, but big damage on the Aston Martin on the final lap of the race, and now crawls his way. Oh, and that is, you can see just in the language of the car, he's not hugging that barrier deliberately, I don't think. Though he has managed to sort of fight it back towards the other side of the track, as it's going to get very busy. That is, who is that behind him? That is Addison and Pignon, who've been having a fight on the road. Oh, this is getting very awkward in the final couple of corners of this race. Addison has a look down the inside, Pignon around the outside, 3 wide at turn 11. That's not going to work. Pignon slams the wall. Addison goes through. Drag race between Neuwirth and Pignon, and it is going to be Patrick Pignon, the number 30 car, that takes it at the line. So down to 23rd position for Votek in the end. Gareth Fullin will finish in 23rd. Thomas Morant coming in at 25th as some of our other drivers round out the grid. But my goodness, what an absolutely monumentally busy and exciting race. The Pro Series, it never disappoints. It never has. But my goodness, when you put some of the best drivers on the platform all together like that, you get fireworks. Exactly the sort of fireworks that I was thinking that we may have today, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. But what an amazing race from Valentine. He finally puts it all together when it mattered and gets himself a victory here in the Pro Series. Let's see, wait for the official results to, or the post further any stewards' inquiry penalties, the preliminary results in just a moment for that. But my goodness, that was an exceptional bit of action that we had going on here at Watkins Glen. It's always a circuit that provides us amazing thrills and spills, and we didn't have any mixed weather. We thought could add something into the mix, but we didn't need it. We had enough going on for us to witness and enjoy. So we'll wait for those to make their way through in just a second. We'll also keep an eye and see if we get anyone for interviews potentially. Don't have them all too often, but it'd be lovely if we could. No one currently sitting in the interview box. If you are able to poke anyone to encourage them to have an interview, then please do go ahead. Do love to speak to the drivers whenever we can. As having a look, see if those graphics have come through. Still, by the looks of it, seem to be waiting on those. So maybe not quite having been published just yet, but Valentine Barrier, he was patient. We saw him back out of making a move on several occasions. He was just waiting for something to happen. And although, yes, he did profit from the contact between Boothby and McCormack, there is no doubt, and he profited from the squabbling as well. There are two things that cannot be taken away from Valentine and all of that. One was his immense pace. He had to climb back up to that position, and he fought back beautifully. He had some mistakes, he had some errors, but the raw pace that he has shown so far this season has really put himself in a great position in how he's managed to get that Honda to work for him, and that was a perfect example today. And he stayed composed. He didn't make the same sort of unforced errors that he did at Paul Ricard, and he stayed patient, and he was catching up to George Boothby without a doubt. If McCormack had got past quickly, would he have been able to hunt on after him? That's another question, but with the balance between the Honda and the Porsche, it was always going to be a tricky task for the Porsche to get by. As my game crashed in the background, so thankfully that happened at the end of the race and didn't affect anything. Still waiting for the race results to come through. We'll give it a few more minutes for the graphic. If not, I may have to do a bit of a manual run through with what I have left of my overlay over here. But an absolutely monumental race here at Watkins Glen, and whilst we're just having a bit of a pause to see how all of that CFO's graphics come through, where are we heading for the Pro Series next week? We are going to the Hungaroring, so one that is a little bit more complicated to overtake at, but will undoubtedly provide us with amazing action. And the graphics have now made their way through, so let's have a run through this grid order. If OBS would respond kindly to me, and I will give you that in just a moment when I can. Not quite sure why it's deciding to be such a pain at this point in time, but hopefully I can switch that over in just a moment. But yes, the Hungaroring, definitely a circuit that is tricky to pass at. There is no doubt. Probably one of the most difficult overall for anyone to make moves up. So qualifying will be incredibly important there. Porsche, very quick there again. Bentley, if anyone in the Pro Series wishes to bring a Bentley, then that may be your point where you can start to compete for a race victory, because that car is very quick around the Hungaroring, able to take the curves very nicely. So Barrier, Karekis, Hutchinson, your podium finishers with Boothby, Jardier, as it now decides to refresh. Apologies for that, everybody. Slight delay within OBS. McCormack finishes 6th. Samir, Mateus, Tinko, and Timo Carpenter round out the top 10 with Shins, Ida, Whitehead, Shuchinov, and Walsingham seeing their positions down to 15th place. Busy day for some of those drivers. Gerardis, Granay, Shana, Solotov, and Steinbrenner see their way to the end of the top 20, with Addison, Pignon, Neuwirth, Garofalin, Morant, Hoffman, Penland, Porco, Mellis, and Marco Bischoff down to 30th. It's not often we see that name that far down, only collecting 170 points from this race. I imagine that will be a drop score. Florian Duakop, your last categorized finisher, and then DNS for Poznikov, Lay, Vasna, Mesaoud, Nunez, Lateo, Boucher, and Malik Mamad at the end there. So disappointment for some of those drivers, and Watkins Glen being very unforgiving. We always knew it was going to be, especially with that inner loop chicane. It is a menacing one to try to wield a car through there, but some of the drivers managed to do it beautifully. Some of them ended up being caught out, and some of them just put on an incredible show, which is what we've come to expect in the Pro Series. It doesn't look like we'll have any interviews today, which is a big shame, but amazing action as always here in the Pro Series. And if you have enjoyed watching this and fancy having a bit of a go at some of this racing on LFM yourself, then do head over to the Low Fuel Motorsport website at lowfuelmotorsport.com and get yourself signed up, get yourself a license, work your way through the ranks, and you could be competing on track with some of these amazing drivers and can be competing for some very, very exciting prizes at the end of the season. A lot on the line for these guys in the Pro Series, hence why they leave absolutely nothing on the table. We will be heading to Hungary next week then, same time, same place for the Pro Series. We'll have to see how it all plays out there. Will it be just as dramatic? I have no doubt. But until then, it will be goodbye.